The Toronto Raptors blow the brakes off the Brooklyn Nets, the lowly Brooklyn Nets, that allegedly both of these teams are supposed to be competing for Cooper Flag, but one of these teams looks a hell of a lot better than the other one, and I'll let you guess which one it is. Yeah, it's preseason, but some trends are emerging for the Toronto Raptors. First takeaway, this is a really fun team to watch. I don't know about you, but I am thoroughly entertained. Give me a W in the chat if you are thoroughly entertained. The brand of basketball is awesome. Toronto Raptors got back starting point guard Immanuel Quickley, and it didn't come out so smooth in the beginning. He looked rusty, but by the end of it, it was very clear that all the gym work, all the strength training, and all of the improvements that Immanuel Quickley has made were very evident. We are going to have a lot of W's. We got a holy W. We got a W, a W, a W, a Karen Hall W. Okay. Yes, we did get a Cameron Johnson audition. And to those of you who've been sleeping on Cameron Johnson, just made a video about him, a couple of videos about him and how he would be such a beautiful fit next to the Toronto Raptors. I got good news and I got bad news. Good news is this is a really fun team to watch, and we've got a lot of players to talk about. We got players to talk about up the wazoo. I've never used the term up the wazoo, but I'm very excited. I'm thoroughly excited about this team. We have a film breakdown where some very interesting plays that we can look at. We're going to do that. We have a call in link in the description. I'd love to hear from you. If you're super excited about this team, and you better be after the last 2 years of hell that we've gone through as a fan base, please call in and let us know what is exciting you about this team. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to let you know what's exciting me about this team. So here's just the general overview. And this game had a lot in common with the last game. Number one, the Raptors didn't shoot that well today. They shot pretty poorly from three, but it was all the other stuff that really carried them through. Their playmaking, the quick decision making, the point five basketball that Darko preaches really carried them through. Their defense, their overall pickup point was insane. There should be a stat for this, and there is the average length of pickup point from the basket. I think the Raptors are picking up higher than I've ever seen them pick up before. And it's really awesome to watch. It was great. Another thing that carried through from the last game is that the Raptors blew out their opponent and then they put in their third stringers. Darko stuck with the third stringers. And then we got a game at the end. And just like against Boston, the third stringers pulled through. Except this time, it wasn't Brandon Carlson. It was Ulrich Shamshay with a huge block and a huge turnover and a huge dunk. Wow. You see the flashes of brilliance here, and I got news for you. RJ Barrett did not play this game. Jacoby Walter, who I'm so insanely high on, did not play today. Bruce Brown did not play today, and Kelly Olynyk did not play today. This is a pretty decent team, guys. I'm not saying they're going to win a championship. I'm not saying they're a lock for the playoffs. But you'll realize yesterday we did a breakdown of the ringer saying, "Oh, take the under on 29.5. If you hate money, you should take the under on the 29.5." I think this team, if they want to be good, they have the building blocks of being pretty good. Another thing that held true from the last game was that Grady Dick was once again the shot leader in terms of attempts. He didn't make a ton, but the one he made were so impressive. I had to do a double take. Another thing that held through, Scottie Barnes hitting threes, 3 for 6 tonight. That was awesome. Let's take a look at just how this game broke down. And they really pulled away in that third quarter. And it was really a lot of Immanuel Quickley. In the first half, I would say for my first half player of the game was Jamal Shead. I was so amazed. And we're going to, a lot of the breakdown that we're going to look at is just all the wonderful little things that Jamal Shead does and why he keeps reminding me of one of my favorite Raptors of all time, Kyle Lowry. And it was neck and neck through the first half. The Nets had a excellent performance from Cameron Johnson, who at one point had 30 points in his first 23 minutes, but they really pulled away in the third, and it was an 11-0 run, and then it was a 9-0 run. It was just an insane. It was right here, that first run, and then it was right here, that second run. And the second half, when it was winning time, this team just dominated. Yes, it's the Nets. Yes, it's preseason. Yes, you're undermanned. Yes, this probably does not translate to beating the Boston Celtics in the regular season or beating, a team in the playoffs. But it's fun. It's fun. And you see the building blocks and you see the potential and you see that people who say that Scottie Barnes and Immanuel Quickley are not the types of guys that you want to build around, those people are just straight up wrong, in my opinion. Joe Wolfson, team feels deeper for sure. Uh, Joe, is your son who I think it is? Is your son Dan? If so, salute to you, salute to Mandy, and salute to Dan. Okay, let's take a look at who did what, and then we'll get into some of the film. So overall, the Raptors shot much better from the field. It was largely carried by just elite paint finishing, and they scored, I think, 62 points in the paint. We'll take a look at that. 30.6% from three, but they held the Nets to 31, and I think that that is important. Overall, they crashed the glass pretty hard. They win the rebound battle. They win the assist battle. I'm sure Darko Rajakovic is very pleased. 34 assists, 9 steals, 7 blocks, 18 turnovers, including a lot of really just silly ones, but you live with it, right? When you're passing more, you're going to turn the ball over more. But the effect of the offense, it's just efficient. Overall, it's efficient. The Raptors didn't shoot brilliantly from the line. The Nets did. The Nets got to the line more. They shot better from the line, and you still managed to win. And it was largely due to the fact that your offense was just that much more efficient. In the first half, the Nets did get out to a 10-point lead, and it was a little bit shaky. I think the ball was sticking a little bit too much in Immanuel Quickley's hands. He didn't seem to be overly connected with his teammates. And I think that is to be expected given the fact that he has missed all 4 of the first preseason games. But I'm really happy he got this one in the bag and he looks fantastic. Okay, take a look at overall the box score. And you got another pretty damn good one from Scottie Barnes, who had 21 points plus 18 in 26 minutes, shot 7 for 12 from the field, nothing forced, absolutely nothing forced. A lot of his threes were catch and shoot. One was self-generated, if I'm not mistaken, but three for 6 and 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 1 block, and you just get a sense of how many different ways this guy can dominate. Last game, without Immanuel Quickley, he did a lot more of the playmaking stuff. Tonight, didn't need to. 9 points, 10 assists from Immanuel Quickley. He didn't force a single thing. In fact, he took fewer shots in his 24 minutes than any of the other starters, and he was really just willing to be a table setter. And look, he took 2 threes tonight. I would not be surprised at all, if he takes 10, 11, 12 on a nightly basis. Okay. I mean, you have not seen anything yet from Immanuel Quickley, and I think just looks so good. Ochai Agbaji was really good, man. Every single shot he missed was from 3. Everything inside the line, he hit. Plus 18, 16 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists for Ochai Agbaji, including a steal. I thought he looked great. Gradey Dick, you look at the box score and you're like, 5 for 14, 2 for 8 from 3, 12 points. Gradey Dick, the lowest plus minus in the starting unit. I don't think that's reflective of just how good some of the stuff he did was. There was that enormous block that we're going to take a look at. Some of the threes, that he hit, and just his defensive effort, his ability to be disruptive, some of the rebounds that he's getting. And again, leading the team in volume of shots, and he also led the team in minutes. I think this is a huge, huge sign of growth. Bruno Fernando shot 3 for 3. It didn't stop him from being really funny on the court, and he made a couple of hilarious mistakes, which I think were funny. And overall, I think this is one of his better games. That's not saying a lot, but it was. Chris Boucher plus minus 0, and he was one of a few players that on this team that did not post a positive plus minus tonight. And in 11 minutes, he had 10 points. He was a gunner, and he was a good outlet valve for Jamal Shead. So, as a point guard, sometimes when you get stuck, it just helps to know where your offense is going to come from. And when Chris is on the court, he's letting it fly. So he got 11 attempts up in 8 attempts up in 11 minutes, and that was just assertive. Overall, we saw the first time Garrett Temple, and he was negative 13. Jamias Ramsey, another negative 13, and that unit really bled minutes down the stretch and almost let the Nets catch up. But I'm really glad that those young guys are having that experience, and that these games don't count. So I'm really happy that Darko's letting them play through those mistakes. And I think you're going to find out a lot about some of these players. Jonathan Mobo had, I would say, a mixed game, right? I mean, I like how he crashes the glass. I like some of his playmaking. I like the steal that he got. But overall, still having some trouble adapting to the length and speed of the game in terms of where to get his shots off. He's going to spend some time in the G League, but I got news for you. You cannot imagine that you have 4 draft picks in a draft and you hit on all of them. It rarely ever happens, but I think it's happened here. I have no doubt that these guys are all gonna be relatively successful to their draft position, and that includes Jonathan Mobo. We saw some Davion Mitchell minutes tonight, 1 point to 4 assists, 2 rebounds, but I like some of his secondary playmaking. And even though he went 0 for 3, sorry, 0 for 2 from 3 and 0 for 3 from the field, I like the shots overall that he took. I didn't feel anything was overly forced. And I'll be more upset when he starts passing up threes than just missing them. And DJ Carton, I mean, if he's your fourth string point guard, you're sitting pretty because I think he could give your second string point guard a few years ago a run for his money in terms of overall talent. I think this is just a team that has deepened themselves out very quickly because, again, you're playing guys in the 11th, 12th, 13th spot that are just not going to play during the regular season when you're healthy. Kelly Olynyk is a huge upgrade over Bruno Fernando, just a huge one, right? And a great playmaker at that who's going to smooth out your offense and is just a vet. And Bruce Brown is in a contract year, and he will probably take a lot of those Boucher minutes. And again, settle your offense down. Another playmaker, another smart cutter, another guy who can occasionally hit from the corners and rebound the basketball and defend a little bit. And then you got Jacoby Walter, who I think is just going to do a lot of the same stuff that Gradey does, except he's probably a better finisher inside and does a lot of the same movement shooting stuff. So, internal competition is great. And I think this team has some internal competition at this point. Like you can make a case in the first half that Jamal Shead outplayed Immanuel Quickley. You can absolutely make a case that between Shead and between Shead and Mitchell, there's some legit competition. You can make a case that between Jakobi, Gradey, and Ochai, there will be a battle for minutes at the 2. You can absolutely bet your bottom dollar that if RJ Barrett does not guard, there's going to be something behind him that can push him. But I think it's also important that with Ochai, Davion, Jamal, you got all these hungry guys on that second unit, Jonathan Mobo, right? And those guys are going to push you every day in practice, and it's going to create this great environment. And what I loved, down the stretch is Bruno did, sorry, not Bruno. Wow. Bruno Caboclo coming to my mind here. What I really loved was down the stretch, we had this, brilliant block by Ulrich Shamshe, which we're going to look at in a second. And he followed that up, by getting very hype and channeling it to Dikembe Mutombo. And I was so hyped when I saw that. I was like, oh yes, like I am so rooting for this kid. And then we saw him follow that up with a turnover. And I didn't see him hanging his head. He got right back on defense, and I loved it. And then when Darko Rakovic called a timeout, I didn't see a lot of the traditional head hanging. And again, it's preseason, but you do have a rookie who just made a big mistake. And there's none of that. And he's not down on himself, and his body language wasn't down. And nobody was just pointing fingers and saying, what the hell are you doing? And then, of course, a couple plays later, he gets himself open for that dunk on the alignment, and the Nets miscommunicated, and he gets open at the rim. So I just thought it was just an indictment or indictment. No, indication. It's an indication. Indicament. That's not a word. I thought it was an indication of just how connected this team is. A lot has been made of their connectivity off the court, and Immanuel Quickley, Scottie Barnes, they both mentioned we like each other, and that matters. You know, Sometimes you like each other, but it's oil and water on the basketball court. Like, you just don't have a lot of natural synergy. Darko leaned on a lot of heavy guard lineups, 2 guards. I mean, if you consider Scottie a big guard, then you have 3 guards on the court almost at all times. And it really helped. And it really helps that your bigs can pass, and it really helps that you have high IQ basketball players on the court for the most part. And despite so many passes that are being made and the expected rate of turnovers when you pass the ball as much as you do here, they're not turning the ball over as much as I'm expecting them to, and they're actually generating great offense despite not having their big guns. So I just thought it was so interesting. This game was so interesting. Okay, let's take a look at the tape, and then we'll get to the callers. There are already 2 callers lined up, Tetrahedragon and Baxter, who have called very recently. If you would like to call in, I'm going to drop the link in the description, and you can the link is already in the description. I will drop it again in the chat in a few minutes, but you can definitely call in and get in line. Okay, so let's take a look at some plays here, and I'm just going to let you know it's going to be a lot of Jamal Shead. Okay, I'm just so impressed with this kid. Take a look at this hounding defense. I mean, where was this last year, man? Where was this? It was nowhere. And look at this pressure. It's just uncomfortable, right? It's so uncomfortable to play against a team that's playing so hard, and they're playing so hard in preseason, right? This is the type of team that could surprise a Minnesota or a Denver in the regular season, and you want that. And look at this. And again, this is going to be Scottie getting the rebound, and what a benefit to have a big playmaker like this who can run like this. But look at what Jamal Shead does on this play. So Jamal immediately, and it's just his off-ball awareness is so great, and Scottie immediately has mapped out the entire court. Like Scottie is a supercomputer, right? In transition, and he knows exactly where this is going. So defender turns his back, and what's going to happen here is boom, he draws two to the basketball. And right now, Davion Mitchell is in a position where he's not really threatening Dennis Schroeder at all, right? And Dennis Schroeder would know all about being a guard with very little gravity. But Davion has somehow even less gravity than him. So the fact that he's able to gap between the defense here and still find this, and the fact that Scottie's able to make this pass over the defense is very impressive. And boom, they miscommunicate that, and Jamal Shead with the dunk. Okay, Scottie, this is a very interesting play. I'm not gonna lie. This was just very awkward little Euro step, but I'm glad he completed it. It wasn't a travel, but it's not as smooth as you would like it to be, but it's gonna get smoother. Here's here's Immanuel Quickley. This little turnover, and again, a little too much dribbling in the first half, but he really composed himself in the second half. Now, look at the defense here. Now, watch Jamal Shead on this entire play and tell me if he reminds you of a certain number 7 who played for the Toronto Raptors. The quickness to be able to read this entire play. And right now, number 10 is not looking, but Jamal Shead knows exactly what he's doing. And I love that. Just take a look, and just let's slow it down here and look at when Jamal Shead reads this. He knows exactly what's happening here. And you probably blame the other net who's in the corner for not cutting behind the defense here and going out. But you could also blame 10 for not passing. But nevertheless, to be able to compose yourself, look at where we are here. That's a 6'10 guy coming at a 6'1 guy. I'm being generous with 6'1, and he gets himself in position in a split second. He's not moving. How did he do that? How the hell did he do that? And how did Ben Simmons not see this? You know what I mean? Oof. Just, I don't know. That was just, it was so impressive. Okay. Okay. Now, this is a little shocked and a fool here. It's going to be back to back shocked and a fool moments, but bear with me. We can't be too positive. We have to keep it balanced here. And this is the second time this has happened with Bruno Fernando, where he goes up for a rebound with his own teammate, and then somehow we lose the basketball because of it. It happened last game too, and I just think that it's hilarious. But nevertheless, and boom. Okay. And this is another Bruno Fernando low light where he's going to grab the basketball. And dude, I don't know how you turn this basketball over. Like, I don't know how you don't see the guy right in your field of vision, but nevertheless, like, he's so funny sometimes. Okay. All right. Jonathan Mobo, middle of the court. We've gotten used to this at this point, right? Okay. Little floater. I think give him a couple of months. He's going to hit this. His touch around the basket wasn't bad, but look at Gradey among a sea of trees just saying, "Get up." And he just goes for it. And when Darko Rakovic says that Gradey is more than a shooter, this is what he means. He's a rebounder. He's a playmaker. He's a 3-level scorer. He's the guy who can really score on all 3 levels, and I think that is just awesome. Look at that block. I love that. That's a block on Dennis Schroeder. Love it. Love it. He's going to be a shot blocker, guys. There's Hakeem Olajuwon up here. Love it. Okay. Okay, the benefits of Jakob Poeltl as a passer. Now, I'm going to say that this would be 100% a dunk for Chris Boucher if Cam Johnson does not grab him here. That's a foul. That's a foul. 100% that's a foul. But Chris does not get benefit of the doubt. Now, this, let's try that again. This time, Chris Boucher is going to find Jamal Shead. Now, once again, Jamal is just so friggin' underrated. The box score does not capture this guy's greatness. Now, the paint is wide open for a cut, and I have no idea why. Davion Mitchell and Bruno Fernando should not be the reason. Like, this is just poorly botched. This is like very botched execution, and I have no idea why they're attacking Jamal Shead like he's, I don't know, Steph Curry. But hey, great read by Chris Boucher, cuts backdoor. Chris is a great cutter, and boom, that's a dunk. That's great. Just take a look at this a little bit slow and look at how smoothly Jamal sees this. He's so aware. He's so aware. Gregory saying to 100 likes and beyond. Why stop there? Let's get to 200 likes. Also, thank you so much to this community for getting us over 11,400 subscribers. If you're not subscribed and you feel like subscribing, please subscribe for more content. Yeah, that happened. Sorry, guys. I clicked a button and booted myself out. We also lost Baxter in the process. Sorry, guys. Okay, let's load that up again. Okay. Where were we? We're right here. Okay. Okay. Noble Venom saying, damn, rest in peace. Okay. Okay. We went through these. My bad. Give me 1 second here to clean this up. Where were we? We're right here. Yep, that was the turnover. And that's the play to Chris. Great. That's where we were. Sorry about that, guys. Lewis saying, I'm interested in who made the cut. As in who made the roster cut? Yeah, that should be interesting. Jameson Battle deserves that spot. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next play. That was Gradey with a subtle little crossover on Cameron Johnson, who's a really good defender. Crosses him up. Quick first step there. Ochai Abaji is in the corner. Gradey goes into 3 defenders, really, I mean 2.5 defenders, and finishes at the basket. All that weight training is really paying off. Great. Awesome. And this is the benefit of having a big who can do this. And this is why Ochai Abaji is shooting 6 for 6 inside the arc. I mean, everything is so easy for him right now. He just has to cut. And you know what? No disrespect to Ochai. RJ's even better at that. So they're both capable. They're both athletic wings who can do this. This system works. Okay. Are you ready for a little Gradey Dick action here? Boom. Blocked at the rim. Like I told you, he's Hakeem Olajuwon. He's channeling Hakeem Olajuwon right now. This is not, it's not Klay Thompson. This is not Reggie Miller. This is Hakeem Olajuwon. He's doing his shit right now. I love it. Like, Gradey has been so impressive. All right. Immanuel Quickley with probably one of my favorite plays of the night. Look at how quickly he beats, I believe that's Noah Clowney, if I'm not mistaken. Number 1 off the dribble, and he gets the rim. And by the way, if you read the scouting report on Immanuel Quickley last year, you knew that this was a weakness of his. He didn't finish well around the basket. This was the thing we saw with Fred for years, where he didn't finish well around the basket. So it's so important that Darko has actually kind of beaten this into him, and he's so much better at it now. Finishing through contact. And what I loved the most was the little shimmy shake. Okay, take a look at the little dance after. Oh, the vibes are immaculate. Okay, here is Jamal Shead. That's a Bruno Fernando, rejects the screen, goes right to the basket. First step is elite. I don't want to say elite like Allen Iverson because that's godly, that's otherworldly. But his first step is absolutely at this point giving him the separation to get to the basket. And instead of going up for the layup, which he very easily could do, he takes this opportunity to feed the roller and the cutter, which is Ochai Abaji, who gets an easy layup. And this is Jamal Shead again, this time with Bruno Fernando, puts Dennis Schroeder on his hip. That's a rookie. That's a veteran. I think Dennis Schroeder's been playing in the league for about 11 years now, if I'm not mistaken. And he's been playing professionally since he was 16 years old. This is a rookie manipulating him. And look at that beautiful skip pass across the corner. Again, if that's Kelly Olynyk, that's going up, that's going in. If that's Gradey Dick, he just his ability to see these little gaps, his court awareness is so elite. Like I cannot stop raving about this kid. Jamal Shead is really freaking good. And I think it speaks volumes that as much as Darko has cut back his rotation and shortened his rotation, Jamal Shead is always in there. Like he's just in there. And I thought it was just such a gutsy game from him. And yeah. And the final play that we are going to look at, which is Omar Shamshay. And this is a man who is mad. Okay. This is a man who is angry. This is a man who is not going to take any freaking prisoners and he's going to humiliate you. And I love this. Oh my God. It was so cool. Okay. Some key takeaways about every player. Let's just go through it quickly and then we'll get to the callers in about 5 minutes. Let me just give you quick thoughts on the players that I really I just want to express some thoughts on, specifically when we talk about the young players. Number one, Scottie Barnes. You know, nothing he showed me in this game is something I don't already know about him. I think he's great. Uh, Nitpicking on something small, there was a moment where Jack Armstrong said something about, Immanuel Quickley is like a guy who knows this is his team. No disrespect to Scottie Barnes. Everyone's talking about Scottie Barnes, but really you need a point guard. I don't understand the point of that comment other than his continuation of his weird Scotty rhetoric for years now. And I don't really get it. I don't know what Scotty did to Jack Armstrong. I see them doing commercials together. I just don't understand why he can't understand there's a clear separation and what type of talent Scotty is. But nevertheless, it's just some little comment that just kind of struck a nerve with me. I think Scotty was great. He didn't force anything. He let his teammates eat. He knows this is preseason. He knows it's about getting reps. He knows it's about connectivity with his team. And I thought he connected very well. He didn't force anything. As I said, he took 12 shots. He didn't come out and try to, humiliate anybody. These are the Nets. These are the Brooklyn Nets. His team was comfortably ahead for the most part. And he was a huge part of it. His defense was great. Some of the rotations were great. There was a play where, Yak is defending the basketball and he just comes over and he just swatted it out of nowhere. And certainly, I focused a lot of my film on Jamal Shead and Gradey Dick because I don't need a preseason game against the Nets to tell me what I already know about Scotty, which is he's a really damn good player. And I think he's a top 20 player in the NBA right now. And I think he looked like it tonight. Jakob Poeltl, another great performance, right? Just a well-rounded game, 2 blocks and 14 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. I'm really warming up to the idea of him being a defensive anchor for this team. Immanuel Quickley, again, a game of 2 halves. First half, you saw the struggles. You saw some of the low processing speed. You saw sometimes getting a little bit lost, kind of in the weeds of where are my teammates, pulling the basketball out when there was a clear advantage to go, just wasn't in sync with his teammates. In the second half, he was in sync with his teammates. He got paint touches at will. He was sucking in 2 defenders. There was a beautiful play where he, had an almost paint touch, pulls it out, threatens to shoot a 3, and then springs it over to Gradey and gets him the cleanest shot of his night. So I just think IQ is a work in progress as a facilitator. I think his scoring has taken a major jump. I would not be surprised if he averages 23, 24 points per game this year. And you say, well, if he's going to average 24, who's going to not average 24? Because, you think to yourself, maybe he's the 3rd leading scorer. I don't know. Maybe he could average 18 and 8 assists or 9 assists. Either way, I'm very comfortable with him as a lead guard at $32 million going forward. I mean, he didn't get fat. He didn't get complacent. He's really pushing for it, and you can tell he's hungry. He wants to win. He wants to prove some people wrong, And when he says that nobody holds him to a higher standard than he holds himself, there's a lot of people who talk a big game. He's not talking a big game. He's walking a big game. His body of work proves his work ethic year over year. Ochai Agbaji has made a believer out of me more so than Davion Mitchell. I think Ochai Agbaji is really showing some of that promise that Masai Ujiri saw in him when he traded that late first round pick that eventually turned into Isaiah Collier that everyone was very upset about, myself not really included. I understood the trade at the time, but when Ochai came out last year, he really struggled. Struggled with his shot. He struggled with his efficiency. His defense was good, but not great enough to compensate for his lack of shooting. And at this point, if you're a 6'5" guard who cannot shoot, you're really in trouble in the NBA. And the shooting is still a work in progress. And that's going to continue to be a work in progress throughout the year. What he's shown me is that he guards at the rim, he cuts, he's really intelligent. He's way more intelligent than I gave him credit for last year. His secondary playmaking is very sufficient. We're seeing him develop in front of our eyes, and it's really been awesome. He's a really good athlete, and he might just turn into an actual NBA player, which is great. That's what you want. He's 24 years old. I think he's got some room to grow here as a shooter, but the defense is really impeccable, and some of the athleticism and transition play could be very impressive. Jameson Battle, who got off the bench and played those garbage time minutes with that lineup that really lost a ton of minutes. I saw glimmers of hope with him. He always seems to stick out in bad lineups. I would love to see him get more minutes with the good lineups, which is what he got last game, but he didn't get into the game until much later in this game. So I really hope he's not cut. He's on an Exhibit 10 deal. He's going to be with the 905, but I think he's done just about enough to earn an actual contract spot, and I would hate for him to get away from us. DJ Carton and Davion Mitchell were just a bit of a mixed bag. I'm impressed with with Davion's playmaking at times and his pickup point defense, and his off-ball defense has just been a hair better than it was last year. So I think that's good. Jemias Ramsey might just be a guy who is necessary at the G League level, but I'm not really sure I see his value as he often gets in trouble when he has to make decisions, right? So he's a gunner. He's going to shoot. And again, we saw this with Javon Freeman Liberty last year, where if you're undersized, you got to be able to play the one a little bit. And I'm not really seeing a lot of natural one skills. But that being said, is a hell of an athlete. Ulrich is such a riddle, right? At this point, like he has a play where he runs down the court so fast and he sets the screen and he seals it so well and he blocks a shot that you don't think he should. And there's a lot of players like this in the world where their athletic potential is so insane and you just say, well, yeah, but they don't really know how to play basketball. We'll see if it ever comes through for them, whatever. But I've learned over time that people get good at things when there's the right recipe within them. So when they have stick to itiveness, when they have the mental toughness, when they are eager learners, people tend to get better. I saw this with Giannis, in his rookie season. You see this with Scottie early on. And these are guys who've made incremental, huge growths, if not exponential growths. And I think that, by the end of the year, it will be very, very obvious as he cleans up some of his mistakes that maybe instead of making a mistake once every 6 plays, now he'll make a play or making a play once every four. He makes a pretty big mistake once every 4 plays. And if you're in the NBA, you can't have a mistake rate higher than like 4%. Like you'll cost your team so many runs, momentum. You're unplayable at that point, right? He's too error prone at this point, too turnover prone, too foul prone to play minutes in the NBA. And he's probably going to be struggling in the G League as well. But stay patient with this because this kid's potential is so immense. And it's not just because he runs fast. And it's not just because he has long arms and big hands and he catches the ball well. It's just because there aren't 10 human beings his size who do what he does on the planet. Is that even crazy to say? There might be 10, maybe 10, 15. It's really a small group of human beings at that size with his coordination, his balance, his tenacity and his athleticism and his burst and his speed. And, again, when we talked to his trainer, it was like anything you think is supposed to take 6 months, he picks it up in 3. Well, that speaks glowingly about him potentially being the backup center going into next season. And I think he will carve himself out as a backup center as early in next season, at which point you'll have a 19-year-old who's a backup center. And at worst case, he's a third string center who, continues to work down in the G League. Yes, you have to be patient with Ulrich, but that patience at the end of it could result in a real, like, I don't want to say all-star, but that's what this is supposed to become if everything goes right. That's the type of player, like his athleticism and his speed and stuff. Like this is stuff like Pascal Siakam stuff, right? Like that's what made Pascal special. But Pascal wasn't 18 when we got him. If Pascal was 18 when we got him, you would be surprised if you saw him on an NBA court. He would never even be on an NBA court, right? It's so impressive to be this good, this young, given where he's coming from and given the experience that he has. Give it some time, but he's going to be so fun to watch in the G League. I cannot even wait. And Jamal Shead, I have to say, throughout this preseason, my biggest takeaway of this preseason, now that we've wrapped up and we're now 5 games removed from the start of preseason, and Jamal's played all of them, if I'm not mistaken, right? There's one game where he was not crazy impressive, and even in that game, he wasn't unimpressive. The idea that you traded Jalen McDaniels and got yourself a legit, possibly 12-year type of career guard who could probably excel to being one of, like, I see him as being maybe one day one of the like, I could see him being a starting point guard, like a role playing starting point guard. He's such a good table setter. He's so tenacious defensively. If that jump shot ever comes around, my God, like you really have something here in this kid, and you got him for nothing. We walked into this offseason with Jalen McDaniels. We walked out with Davion Mitchell, Jamal Shead, and a really high pick next year in the second round. I think that trade has to be studied. I think it will go down in history as one of the greatest trades of all time. I think it's going to go down as a trade that, while not exactly, will be something like Gravis Vasquez for Norman Powell, like that type of deal where it's so, what was it? It was Norman Powell and something else, right? If I'm not mistaken. Someone help me in the chat. It was Norman Powell plus DeLon, right? Norman Powell plus something. Anyways, I think this is just a brilliant trade, and I've been so impressed with Jamal Shead. And let's get some callers on. So we've got Tetrahedragon, Baxter, TK, Retro, Jasper. We'll go in that order. 5 minutes tops. Okay, Tetrahedragon, what's going on, man? How are you doing?
Hey, good. Yourself? Can you hear me okay?
Great. Yeah.
Okay. So that play where Comchi, I think he made a mistake under the basket, and then I was at that point I didn't see him again, and then all of a sudden he had the rebound. So I'm fairly certain he has the ability to teleport, because he was not at that end of the court, and then he was. It
He
was
ran
amazing.
really fast. Yeah.
And okay, maybe this is just how I
He
felt.
watches Dragon Ball Z all the time, so maybe he has figured out some ability to like shapeshift and teleport. And I never watched Dragon Ball Z, but it's a cartoon, and I'm assuming some of that
I've
stuff goes
seen it.
on. Okay.
I
Do do
mean,
do do do, do people teleport in Dragon Ball Z?
yeah, it's I've
Do they
seen it.
fly through the air? Do they block? Has anyone ever blocked a guy with the game on the line and just like done the Dikembe Mutombo finger wave in Dragon Ball Z? I'm trying to figure out where he got it from.
I don't know where he got that from, but probably Dikembe.
Nice little homage to Dikembe Mutombo. Rest in peace.
Yeah, that's that. Ujiri's speech for him was very, very nice.
Yeah. Anyone else stick out to you apart from Ulrich?
Actually, it was more that everybody did in a way, because it felt like in the first half, like a third of all of the other team's shots around the basket were just blocked. Like guys went up and grabbed the ball, or had their hand on the ball to some extent. I was like, I don't know that I've ever seen this many like glass cleaning blocks in a single section of game. Maybe I don't watch enough basketball, but Like, did you not notice, or is that am I crazy?
Say that again.
Like at least a third
Mhm.
of every time the other team, the Nets, went up to the basket, it felt like the Raptors were blocking it. Like
Well, yeah,
they
the
had a
Raptors
hand
got
on the ball.
7 they got 7 blocks, but they contested a lot at the rim, and I thought that their rotations were pretty good. Like, I'm
Mhm.
used to this team surrendering open shots at the rim. There weren't a lot of those, so I think that that was really good, but I'll have to
Yeah,
look at the film to confirm, but yes, it felt like
it,
everything
it
was,
certainly
like,
felt like that.
just getting through or, getting tipped or yeah, there
Hmm.
was very good contest. I think the defensive energy is very good.
So I'm trying to be a bit faster this time. Uh Quick just looked a tiny bit rusty, but basically the Quick I imagined.
Right.
Just great, but I mean, just a little bit of rust has to come off, and it'll be a couple games.
Mhm.
Um, and the thing you keep talking about Jacoby and how hard you are on him, and I tend to agree, but I just he's new. I just think he's going to need quite a bit of time. I think.
Yeah, I think, when I saw the Raptors play against the Boston Celtics, I saw the vision for exactly how Jacoby Walter will fit into this offense, and it is seamlessly. So Jacoby's a great shooter. Like he's a great movement shooter, and he's like a player who plays a lot of rhythm and a lot of flow. And I think he's a better playmaker than people give him credit for. And that's based on high school tape, and that's just going
Hmm.
back to just the raw talent that he is, right? There's quite a few four-star type of prospects on this team that have made something of themselves, but this is a 19-year-old who, for his draft class, was one of the 10 best players in the country. It was a weak class, yes,
Mm,
but he also wasn't like I think he was a little under-recruited, if you want my honest opinion, and there were moments in Baylor where you look at the early parts and you're like, "Damn, this guy looks like a top 3 pick."
yeah.
And, you know, with there's always this assumption that all rookies struggle. Well, a lot of them do because there's a pace adjustment, a size adjustment, a strength adjustment, etc. Jacoby's pretty strong. He's going to
Mhm.
get stronger, but he's pretty strong. He's a really balanced athlete. And the thing that he needed the most in college basketball was space. And unfortunately, college basketball courts are smaller. There's less talented playmakers. There's less talented players. The paint is usually clogged because there's more traditional bigs. And I just feel like with a big like Jakob, just seeing how much Ochai and Davion are working off of this, I think Jacoby is going to fit right in. So,
Especially if he gets any time with the starting lineup, because the gravity of Scottie and Gradey and RJ and
mhm,
Quickly to some extent is dramatic compared to what he was playing with in college.
agreed. Yeah, and there were a lot of non-shooters for that Baylor team. So, yeah.
Mhm.
Anyways, any final thoughts?
I just had the one thing I wanted to ask you from what you said yesterday, because you
Mhm,
got a text yesterday about an ex Raptor that you might be getting an interview with. Is
mhm.
there any news on that?
He didn't respond. So
Ah,
we'll see. He
okay,
responded once, but he hasn't responded back. So we'll see.
okay.
I'll
Time will
I'll
tell.
I'll, I'll bug him tomorrow, but we'll see.
Fair
All right,
enough.
man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having
All right.
me.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Baxter, what's going on?
Much enjoying the live stream.
Awesome. What'd you think of the game?
It was good. I feel like the Nets just aren't there. I don't know, for like just NBA wise, like skill level, they're going through something, and we needed this game as a team to like demonstrate what our identity is going to be. So I'm glad that everyone took it serious.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say like, okay, they're taking it serious, but there's also this element of like, I think there's another gear of seriousness that they can take it to, right? So we'll see. We'll see how much better it gets. Uh, what did you think of the idea of trade? Like, if we are better than we are expected to be, what do you think of the idea of trading for Cameron Johnson if it costs the first round pick and Bruce Brown?
Well, I just by the looks of it, the Nets should lose because that's should be in their best interest. Either Cooper Flags in the draft class, Ace Bailey. Like there's a lot of players, so
Mhm.
honestly, like giving up a player that just scored 30 points and it looked like it was nothing for him. I don't know. It's in the air because I would really appreciate if he wanted to come to the Raptors and play.
Well,
But it's just
I'm sure he would want to play here because, the alternative is staying on a losing team, and Cam is not a losing player. But that being said, it's not just the scoring and the shooting, it is his playmaking, it is his screen setting. It's just I was observing him so much today because he is one of my favorite players in the league, and I've just always appreciated his game. And I know, through the grapevine that the Raptors really like him as well. So I'm just kind of curious if, you think this team as constructed based on what you've seen. And again, we haven't seen the full thing. We haven't seen RJ. We haven't seen RJ with this crew, right? We got spurts. Like so we got RJ without Scottie and IQ. We got Scottie without RJ and IQ. Then we got a glimpse of Scottie and IQ now without RJ. Like, are we ever going to see these three guys together? But I have a feeling that these three guys playing together is going to be very difficult to stop. Like, I just have that feeling that they could all go off for like 22, 23, 25 points at any given time. And Scottie's going to be such a great playmaker. And those two are also good playmakers. And that's coming along. And I just think that if one of them or two of them are on the court, then that third one can probably buy some minutes with the second unit. And now the defense is a focus. Like, I really don't. I think there's such a gap between this team and the teams that are really bad in this league. Like, people want to put us
yeah,
in the same category as
definitely.
Charlotte, and I think that Brandon Miller looks pretty good, looks really good. Sorry, I think we're way better than Charlotte. Like, I think we're way better than Charlotte. Do I think we could be way better than Atlanta? So at that point, you're not getting Cooper Flag. And so really, what are we doing here? Would you rather get the 7th or 8th pick? Because that's pretty much you're not gonna be able to tank some of these teams. Or would you rather get like the 15th pick and make the playoffs? I think that's sort of the gap here. Like, would you move back 7 spots in the draft to get a young team into the playoffs as an 8 seed?
The Raptors track record for picking, like these 4-star, 3-star college players are it's pretty high. We find gems, but I just don't see how Cameron Johnson fits because would Scottie play small ball 5 or would he be playing small ball 5? It's just you want your best players on the court together
Well, the
at
well,
all
the
times.
well, the
But
interesting thing with Cam is that he would squeeze in at the 4. That would put Scottie at the 3, and you would have just this complete upheaval on your defense, and it would allow Gradey to be a more natural fit off the bench, and he could actually develop much better off the bench. I mean, I've been pushing for Gradey off the bench pretty much, not because I don't think he's good enough to start, not because I don't think he's great to start actually, but Cam does a lot of what Gradey does. He's a movement shooter, he's a good passer, but unlike Gradey, he's a great defender as well. With Gradey going to the bench, now Gradey can have the task of elevating bench units, which I think will be much better for his on-ball development as well. Plus, one of RJ, Scottie, Cam, or Jakob or IQ would always be with him on that second unit. So I just think you basically go from like you're definitely worse than Orlando to you're definitely better than Orlando with the Cam Johnson trade. Like, just because of how good I think the rest of these players are, I really do think, like, you could sneak it like, it sounds crazy to say Cameron Johnson might be the difference between being in the lottery and winning a round in the playoffs or even winning, like, 6 games or like, sorry, winning, like, 2 games in a playoff series, and maybe that's not important to some people, but I'll tell you, like, these experiences, they're very important for a young team. Camaraderie, getting IQ and RJ and Scottie into the playoffs because eventually you do have to cross that hurdle, and at some point, you're gonna have to do that for the first time, right? And you ideally wanna do it for the first time before you're ready, so that by the time you're ready, your window is actually open, you know? I've been
yeah,
talking about championship windows pretty much, like, my whole life because I watched the Sacramento Kings and the Portland Trailblazers in my early childhood lose their championship window. And I just think championship windows are so interesting because you have to time them, and people have this idea that Cameron Johnson is too old. He's played like 300 games in the NBA. He's been very
he was
injured.
crucial for the Suns. Like he was
Yeah,
really crucial.
he's great. Yeah. So I just think that it's really important to understand that, no team is built of just 22-year-olds or 23-year-olds and expects to win. Like, you need a healthy balance. And this is not trading for a 33-year-old Thaddeus Young. It's trading for a 28-year-old movement shooter who's going to be 28 through most of this year. Like, yeah, he's not 22, 23, but he wasn't even in the NBA when he was 22. Like, he came into the league when he was 23. So, yeah,
He's a talker.
he's great. Yeah. Anyways, any observations on players that stuck out to you, and any final thoughts?
Oh, I'm glad that you showed those clips because I was thinking the same thing that you were, but it's just like I have a question just on like defense, like because when does defense become more of an IQ? Like, oh, you have just that brain capacity to understand how the game's played, to like just a heart thing. Because like Gradey is probably the best hustler on the team. Like he doesn't have to be because that's not his role. But that's why I just appreciate his play style because I'm gonna run down the floor, sit in the corner for a little bit. If I get the ball, I'll give him a pump fake. If he bites, I'll drive and kick. But
Mhm.
on the other end, he's just blocking shots, grabbing balls. Like if it's gonna go to the sideline, he's there to get it. But
Right.
then just Jamal said, who's just instincts and like I've seen this how this can plan out. If I put myself here, boom, charging. Like he's just like that. Like he just knows. I was just wondering where would you tip the scale? What type of play would you rather have on the team?
Well, if you're all heart, no brain, you're probably going to commit a lot of fouls. You're going to overcommit on rotations. You're going to get beat backdoor a ton. And if you're all brains and no heart, like, I don't know how you can succeed on the basketball court. Personally, I'd rather have the person who's all heart and then teach them how to play defense, as opposed to the person who has no heart but knows what to do, because that's the player you lose with every time. That's my perspective on it. Now, obviously, you need a bit of both. And with Gradey, yeah, I've noticed that he hustles really hard and he's an extremely hard worker, and he tries to do his work early on defense. He tries to get back. He tries to, he doesn't surrender a lot, I mean, any more than is physically possible for him, because obviously, he is still slight of frame when it comes to being cross matched with a big, or he's still going to be a little bit slow footed on a cross match with a guard, like a point guard, like a quick guard. But I really like how he took on a pretty tough assignment tonight, and did his best. I think he's a really smart player. And
Yeah,
while most of that is shown on offense so far, I'm pretty sure it will start to translate to the defensive end very soon as well. So you'll never see him be like the greatest point of attack defender, like switching his hip and, doing crazy stuff. But you'll see him, working the angles. You'll see him beating guys to the spot. You'll see him studying scouting reports and knowing which way to force in a particular offensive player. And I think that that's worth a lot. The fact that he cares and that he's smart is worth a lot, because there are guys who have all the physical talent in the world, but they don't read the scouting report and they don't care to hustle as hard as he does. So yeah, and I think there's a bit of an underrated thing where when a guy tries, it it has a subconscious way of sort of bleeding over to everybody. Like when you get a block or you draw a charge, like that's the shit that really gets your team pumped up. You know what I mean? There's small
yeah.
momentum swings. Like today, you notice that there was that play with Scottie where Darko calls the timeout to challenge the call. Did you notice that?
I seen the highlights, so they don't put that stuff in. I didn't get a chance to
Okay.
see the game.
Okay. So there was a whole kerfuffle last game where Scotty was very upset with Darko Rakovic for not calling a timeout to challenge an out of bounds call. And today he did challenge it. It was a foul, and I think it was a foul or a turnover, and Scotty was not having it. He was not, but he didn't do anything. Like he wasn't demonstrative about it. And Darko called the timeout, and they challenged, and they won. And the call was overturned, and they had a good laugh about it. And it's like the momentum of the game was really swinging in the balance there, and Darko had the pulse of his team to know that they needed that extra little morale boost there. There's so many small moments throughout a game where momentum can slip away from you, like a really bad turnover in the backcourt where you don't get back on defense can really deflate your team, especially on the road. Something like an errant three ball, which airballs, it can really distract your team, and it can make you like, what the fuck are we doing here? Blown communication, bad body language, even a missed communication where there's no dap up and someone is just kind of like pointing at them and pointing at his teammate and saying, where the fuck were you? That kind of thing can spiral into a lot of bad stuff. So a lot of rigid college coaches try to weed that stuff out. They say, no, we're not gonna do any of that, and any hint of that, you're out. So I have seen zero evidence of bad body language. Well, I'm gonna say like very little evidence of bad body language, and I see a lot of great communication defensively, and there's just enough personnel on this team between Yak, Scottie, Davion, IQ, Kelly, Bruce, where I think you could be like a top 17 defense. Not going to be a top 5 defense, but you could be you can be a middle of the pack defense if you work really hard at it, and you can be a middle of the pack offense if your shots go in, and that's a recipe to be like a top 12, top 13 team. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. Anyways, Baxter, thanks a lot for calling in, man.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Retro Jasper, what's up?
Hello. I'm mainly here to talk about the bench. I get the it's preseason. Obviously, no RJ, no Jacoby Walter. The lineups are looking a bit different. I want to get your opinion on the bench. I think, I do believe that this team, could definitely make the play-in, but looking at the first couple of games of the regular season and the general schedule and the hopes of making the play-in, it's just, I don't know, the bench scares me. I don't know what specifically it is. Maybe it's like the inexperience or like the skill. It's just I don't think that our bench is where it is right now in order for us to be a play-in team.
Mhm.
I think everything else is there. It's just I don't know about the bench.
Okay, so first of all, what is the bench according to you? Like what's your top 5 rotation off the bench?
Okay. For top 5 off the bench, currently I'd play Davion Mitchell at the point guard. For shooting guard, I'd play Jacoby Walter. For small forward, I'd be playing Bruce Brown. For power forward, unfortunately, I think I'd be playing Ochai Agbaji. And for backup center, I really hate Bruno Fernando, but what can you do?
So Kelly Olynyk's just out of the
Oh,
rotation.
sorry, Kelly Olynyk. My bad.
Okay. So KO. Yeah, so I don't think Bruno's going to crack the top 10. Just based on what I've seen.
I hope not.
It's not happening. And I think you have just enough point of attack defense that it will be less of an issue than it was last year. Like, because Kelly Olynyk was just surrendering a lot at the basket. So
Yeah.
between Ochai being able to guard at the rim, and also this isn't hockey, so we're not doing line changes. So
Yeah.
one of your key starters, specifically probably RJ or Scottie, but more than likely Scottie is always going to be with that second unit. So Scottie's going to get the quick hook with the first unit, where that's going to give RJ Barrett more time to score, Immanuel Quickley more time to score, Yak more time to score. And then he's going to come in. I believe the rotation pattern will be right at the end of the first, going into the second. He'll have to lift those bench lineups. And I've really liked his synergy with the bench lineups. It's going to make him much more Jokic-ish in his usage. But that's what you hope for. You hope for Kelly Olynyk's shooting being, something that can space the floor properly for Scottie in that pick and pop. So you hope that can be a go-to. You hope that Ochai and Davion can provide something, and Jacoby or Jonathan Mobo could provide something in terms of defense and cutting. So I think the offense makes sense off the bench. This isn't a bench unit that scares me very much, actually. Is it as talented as some other bench units? Is there a player coming off your bench that's going to inspire as much confidence as an Andrew Nemhard? Probably not. Is there a player coming off your bench who's as good as a Dante DiVincenzo? No, probably not. But I think through the sheer evenness of quality, like, I mean, again, Bruce Brown was a sixth man for a champion just a few years ago, right? We think of him like he's garbage, but he didn't just forget how to play basketball, and he didn't fall off a cliff. He's 27 years old. Kelly Olynyk, again, may not be the greatest center, and I think he's caught a lot of strays this offseason for his rim protection and rim defense, but his analytics looked solid last year when he was playing next to Walker Kessler. So maybe in minutes next to, if Kelly Olynyk is the guy who comes in for Scottie Barnes, him and Yak could be a really interesting duo for those 6 minutes. And then he switches over to the center, but yeah, he'll have Scottie next to him. A lot of Kelly Olynyk's minutes with the Raptors last year, where he struggled so much, he didn't have Scottie with him, and Scottie can do a lot. This is the same Scottie Barnes who did a pretty reasonable job on Giannis and Jokic,
Yeah.
right? So he can do a lot of the center stuff defensively. I mean, obviously you hate to see it, but also, you know what else you hate to see? You hate to see Scottie playing on the perimeter as a defender, and that's what they have Ochai and Davion for, because last year Darko was referencing the stat that he led the league in distance traveled. And 2 years ago, he was second in the league in distance traveled behind Mikal Bridges. So this is just a really active player who takes on a huge load on his body, despite the fact that Josh Lewenberg thinks he doesn't show up for the entire game. I mean, he moves so much on the basketball court. I don't know how to explain it. If you watch him, if you track him for an entire game, you're exhausted. Like, he moves more than any player I've ever seen in a Raptor jersey, ever. Bar none. I've never seen a player move as much as he does. I've never seen a player take as many steps. I remember there was this one play that I broke down in one of our low light films where Scottie covered 4 defenders on one possession, 4 offensive players on one possession, pretty much by himself. Like, I'm just like, this is the craziest, weirdest utility knife defender I've ever seen. So you want to minimize that, because now you actually need him for closing possessions on offense. And, putting him in that center spot almost defensively with a second unit is actually really smart. And Kelly Olynyk, for whatever people want to say about him as a shot blocker, can actually be pretty reasonable if you put a shot blocker next to him. And now you'll run minutes with him and Ochai and Scottie. And Ochai and Scottie are both competent rim protectors as guard wings. And then you have Davion, potentially Jamal Shead, potentially Jakob Walter, and these guys are all reasonable point of attack defenders. So and Bruce Brown, who's supposed to be, in theory, a pretty decent defender. So I don't know, man. I think the bench could be streaky good, and I don't know if it's going to be quite, Raptors bench mob with DeLon Wright and Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl. Maybe it's not that good.
Yeah,
but that was one of the best benches I've ever seen. So, I think they could be a top 10 bench in the league. Yeah. And nice one saying, why not run Boucher with Kelly? So the thing with Chris Boucher, and I'm not trying to get into any more beef with Chris, I just don't think he fits. I don't think he fits what the Raptors do offensively. I don't necessarily think he fits what they do defensively. If you
can't move the ball.
Yeah, I think the offense just sort of dies with him and sort of stops and stalls with him a little too much. I like his activity and his cutting, and if he starts making better decisions, sure, put him on the floor. He's had some positive seasons for the Raptors where he's been really, really reasonable. I just think at this point that defensively it's a little overblown, some of the stuff that he does, because he also gets lost a lot defensively and offensively. And when you are relying on 4 or 5 players to move on a string, if one of them is always on the wrong page, it throws everything off, and you end up with a lot of dead possessions on offense where the ball is just kind of humming around with no place to go. And the ball pretty much goes to him and it stops. It doesn't continue to move. Like with Jamal Shead, it just continues to flow. Bruce Brown, it continues to flow. Even Ochai Agbaji and Davion Mitchell, it's continuing to flow. There's not really a ball stopper on this team other than Chris Boucher. He's the only one. Like him, sometimes Immanuel Quickley, sometimes RJ Barrett. Like those are the 3 guys. But at least with Immanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, those are like 2 of your primary scorers. So I don't know. But yeah, I'm not as worried about the bench. What else worries you about this team?
I mean, that was
Or is
really
that it?
Yeah,
just the bench.
Yeah. I mean, that was really it. I mean, I didn't agree with what the last guy said about the Cam Johnson thing. I think that if the Raptors were to get Cam Johnson, I think you'd be one of the best teams in terms of like spacing the floor, spacing and stretching the floor. I think, with a shooter like that, he's more than just a shooter, as you mentioned. He can do pick and roll and all that.
He can be a ball handler in the pick and roll. He can invert it. He's a movement shooter. He can come off screens. Like, I mean, everything you want Gradey to be, Cam is like a bigger, stronger version of that. And he's just a way better defender. So the archetype fits, the system fits. Will the price be too high? I have no idea. He's something that if I was a contending team like a Dallas, I would be like dying to get him.
Yeah.
If I was Dallas, I would trade Klay Thompson and like 3 first-round picks to get him if I knew for sure he'd be healthy. And again, people might think that's crazy because they're like, "Who's Cam Johnson?" But I'm like, "Yo, man, like you don't understand like what this guy does." And yeah, Baxter's Blackhawk saying Indy trade review. That might be too soon for that. We haven't seen Jacoby, but I'm perfectly fine with not paying Pascal Siakam 45 million. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is like just a win in and of itself. Yeah. Any final thoughts?
No, that's it.
All
Thank
right,
you.
man. Thanks a lot for calling in. Scottie Too Hottie, what's going on, man?
Yo, what's up, man?
What's good?
I'm good, man. How you been?
I've been great. Yeah, this team is super fun to watch.
Yeah, especially when we're racking up the W's.
Absolutely. What'd you think of tonight's game?
Overall, I thought it was a pretty balanced effort. I've really been impressed with Oshai the last couple of games. Feel like he's been playing exactly how I expected him or thought he could really play, just like slashing, locking up defensively. What do you think about his game?
I think he's been great. I really do. I think his rim protection has just really been very impressive to me, and I love guards who can protect at the rim because it's quite rare. So Fred VanVleet did a pretty good job at the rim. Kyle Lowry did a great job at the rim. Jalen Suggs does a great job at the rim. Keon Ellis does a good job at the rim. Again, wings who can protect at the rim are rare. There aren't a lot of them. And Ochai contests at the rim really well. Like that to me changes the equation of who he is as a defender because I didn't really think that was really who he was at Kansas. I don't know if it's because I didn't watch enough. Maybe that's possible. I only watched like 5 or 6 games of his. But it's just something that I've noticed a lot is that when he rotates down, he's almost like a big, like he's a small big and a big guard all in one. You know,
Yeah.
We have this idea in Toronto Raptor land because of the marketing around Vision 6'9" that the only way to be that kind of multi-positional, versatile defender is to be 6'9" with a 7'4" wingspan. But I think Ochai Agbaji does a lot of the stuff that you would expect a player who fits into Division 6'9" to do. It's just he's 6'5".
Yeah, I think
Nathan Taylor saying Dwayne Wade. That's a great example. D Wade, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant to some extent. Yeah, there's some defenders who guarded at the rim pretty well. Yeah,
I think his wingspan's like 6'10", so that helps a lot.
it does. And you know, that's the thing. Like the Raptors may have deviated a little bit from the Precious Achiuwa model, but they're still getting very plus defenders in terms of plus wingspan. So there's not a single player on this team other than Kelly Olynyk who has a negative wingspan. And I think KO is like, even with KO, I think it might just be like flat. I think it's like 6'11". I'd have to check. I think it's like 6'11" with a 6'10" wingspan, something like that. Like it's really close. But the vast majority of players they drafted in, Jamal Shead has a huge plus wingspan. Jacoby Walter has an enormous wingspan, right? Ulrich has a 7'3", 7'4", 7'2", something like that, 7'4" wingspan. So Scottie has a 7'4" wingspan. Like Gradey has a plus wingspan. Like all of them have plus wingspans. And I think that's largely because of this, right? And I saw a little bit of rim protection from Gradey today with that big block that he had. So having guards who can actually protect at the rim. But I think Ochai is at a completely different level. Again, people rate blocks, but they don't rate contests. I care if you get there. Like I really care if you're a you're not gonna be a rim deterrent at 6'5". You're not Victor Wembanyama. You're not Hakeem Olajuwon. You're not Dikembe Mutombo. But I just like guards who get to the front of the rim and do so without fouling. It's just very important. And he's also got this like sort of stocky build where if I do end up with a power forward cross match on Ochai Agbaji, it's not a guy that I have to rotate down and help, which would be the case with someone like a Gary Trent, right? If you just consider the difference between a Gary Trent and an Ochai Agbaji as defenders, it's really night and day. Gary couldn't guard at the rim at all. Gary could not, like Gary was stocky and somewhat stout and, you know, in his lower body as well, but I don't think he was a good defender in the post. So I just think like Ochai does so many great things. And then again, as an athlete, I've been very impressed with him. He's a very good athlete.
Yeah. And like the comparison to Gary Trent. Gary Trent gambled a lot, like a lot of his,
That was
perimeter
scheme
stuff.
related. That was scheme related too, but yes, he did.
Yeah. And I feel like with Oshai, he's more of a, he's gonna guard you face to face. Like he's not gonna try and gamble. He's gonna try and just deter your shot, just like what you said, by contesting.
Mhm.
And he's just a sound player. I feel like maybe to start his tenure with the Raptors, he just came in. He didn't really get his footing right away, which is what a lot of us really expected. But I feel like now with this new team, and he's really honing his role. Like he's getting comfortable out there. You could see, like he's not. He doesn't have the jitters. He's not jumping around like how he was last season. He's more so just playing within the system and playing his role to the best of his ability, which I think, is really what Darko's really preaching to these guys. Like, play your role and be the best at your role. I wanted to talk
Absolutely.
to you. I wanted to talk to you about Gradey. I feel like he's not really getting enough credit defensively as what he's really doing out there, and I feel like a lot of the times the whistle's not really going his way because he's a second year player. I feel like when your name is not really prominent in the NBA, you're not really gonna get the benefit of the whistle. So I feel like maybe he's just not getting enough credit defensively. What do you think about that?
Do you think he's getting a lot of ticky-tack fouls?
I mean, some of the fouls, they're just unfortunate. Like he's just trying to do his best to stay in front of his guy, and then he finds himself in an awkward situation. Guy dives or puts his head underneath his arm and he picks up a foul. Well, I feel like he's there. His instinct is there.
Right.
I feel like again the benefit of the whistle in the NBA is huge. Like sometimes players get the call based on the circumstances rather than the actual play.
Right. Well, I mean, we saw it last year with the strength and training program. He came back, it was better. And Darko likened him last year. The quote was, he's like a 16-year-old. He has the body of a 16-year-old. And I thought that was a little rude, but also I understand where he's coming from, right? You do need a certain amount of strength to play in the NBA. And
Mhm.
positional strength is actually a really good indicator of dominance from superstars. And you see, like, most superstars are strong for their position. So Gradey is weak for his position, and he cannot make up for it with some sort of elite burst length or wiry metrics of like Andre Karolinko. So he's gonna have to be strong. He's gonna have to continue to hit the weights. I think this idea that Grady Dick is a bad defender needs to go away because he's not a bad defender.
Yeah,
I know what a bad defender is. Trae Young's a bad defender. Damian Lillard is a bad defender. Who else is a bad defender? Shit. Anthony Simons is a bad defender. There's a lot of bad defenders. I think for our team, RJ Barrett has to some extent been a bad defender. Like he can get better, but I'm just saying, like last year he was a really bad defender. So I know what a bad defender is. I also know what a competent team defender is, and I know what a great defender is or a good defender. I would put Grady somewhere between competent and good at his maximum upside. I don't think he's ever going to be great. I don't think he's ever going to be competing for all defensive teams or whatever. But when you're 6'8" and he can probably get up to about 220, 225 and be strong and positionally smart, you have a chance to be a good defender. There's a lot of guys like Joe Ingles comes to mind where you're like, he doesn't look like he's some sort of athletic freak. You have to learn angles, you have to learn positions, you have to learn how to cut things off. You have to be a student of the game. Fred VanVleet's not some sort of super bursty athlete. He's a really good defender. Why? How is he such a good defender? Because he had just enough strength for his size. Like for his position, Fred was strong. Like, you know what I mean? Like when
yeah,
you put Fred up against like a 6'3" wiry guard and that guard bumps into Fred, it hurts that guard. Fred is just strong. And if you're gonna be giving up speed, and if you're gonna because you're not gonna change that too much, right? Grady can get at most like 2% faster throughout his life. He's not gonna get that much faster. I'm not a trainer, but I've never seen anyone get like drastically faster at this point. So and he's not gonna get taller at this point. He's 20 years old. He's probably not gonna hit like a growth spurt and become some 7-foot shooting guard. So, and his arms aren't going to grow. So the one thing where he can become better is by reading the scouting report, continuing to expand his awareness of defense, and obviously get stronger. And the strength is going to help him not only on defense, but also on offense. So I think when he hits like his normal playing weight, which will probably be around when he's 23, when he's about 225, 230, and he's like strong, I think he'll be like a 65th percentile defender, like a 65th percentile wing defender, which is probably a little bit better defender than Jaylen Brown. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not bad at all. Like, when I see Gradey, I understand what they're trying to mold him into, and I can't help but think like he can be like a Gordon Hayward kind of player, but with a better 3-point shot. And when I look at Gordon Hayward, like he was not a bad defender. Matter of fact, he had a really good career, especially when he was in Utah. And yeah, I could kind of see the similarities. And overall, I feel like he's just maybe looked at as a bad defender because, like you said, he's not fully met his maximum weight. And
Do you think people look at him as a bad defender because he's white?
no, I don't think so at all. I think
Okay, cool.
it has something to do.
You know, a lot of white wing players do get that reputation of being bad defenders.
But you just mentioned like Joe Ingles, and I think Joe Ingles,
Joe Ingles is foreign though.
I mean, he's white, but I think Joe Ingles is, he was like a 3-and-D kind of guy, and he was, like you said, he wasn't the most athletic guy, but he's gonna cut you off. He's gonna use the angles,
Maroon Prince saying Gradey is more Chandler Parsons than Gordon Hayward if he has to be compared to white guys. So here's the thing. I don't compare him to a white guy. I compare him to Klay Thompson, but I will say this. I think he's more Gordon Hayward than Chandler Parsons.
Yeah,
because of the rebounding. Like the rebounding changes everything for me with Gradey. And here's the thing. When it comes to defense, I've mentioned this probably way too many times, and I mentioned this on the panel as well. We really are good at like doing the eye test on who can shuffle their feet and who can block shots and who can get steals and who can dig, into the handle. And, we have an idea of what a good defender is supposed to look like. But in reality, a good defender is supposed to be positionally sound. A good defender is supposed to be a good communicator. A good defender is supposed to be a good rebounder. A good defender is supposed to understand their assignments and, read the scouting report and just be a good communicator in the team scheme. And you don't need to be a great point of attack defender to be a good defender. Nikola Jokic, the year they won the championship, was a pretty decent defender. People don't want to hear that because he doesn't get the traditional blocks that people think. Luka Doncic, for parts of last year, was a pretty competent defender. The one thing about defense in the NBA is it's much easier to be a good defender at 6'8" than it is to be at 6'1". So honestly, when you're 6'8" and you can rebound, you're never a truly awful defender in the NBA. You have to be trying to be awful. And when I think of a really decent defender that wasn't anyone's idea of some athletic dynamo, but pretty much did it all through mental mapping and just understanding the game, Jorge Garbajosa comes to mind.
Yeah.
Just
I have a question. So, what are you taking? Gradey Dick this year, okay? Or Gary Trent last year?
Gradey. 100%. I'm the wrong person to ask about that, though.
No, but see, that's what I'm saying. Like, to me, Gary Trent, versus Gradey Dick, I feel like I'm taking Gradey because, he's longer. He's 6'8". He's going to finish around the rim. Gary Trent was horrible around the rim. On top of that, I feel like he's not going to gamble as much. And he's going to play better team defense, I feel like, than Gary. And now that's not to say anything bad about Gary, but that's just my opinion,
I'm actually going to ask. I'm gonna run a poll here to see who the chat likes, because I think it's worth doing. So Gary or Gradey. So this is GTJ 2324 or GD 2425.
And not even to mention the potential there. Like Grady's only 20. By the time he's 23, 24, he's going to be like you said, probably 65th percentile defense in the league, which by far is better than what Gary was. You know,
I mean, that's ambitious. I think his rate would fluctuate somewhere between 40th percentile and 65th percentile. I think 65th percentile would be on the extreme upside. Whereas, someone like and that's kind of the type of defender that you would expect Immanuel Quickley to be. If Immanuel Quickley is really lazy on defense, he'll be a 30th to 40th percentile. And if he's great and active on defense, he'll be like 65th percentile. So yeah. And Noble Venom saying movement shooting is far more valuable than what Gary Trent Jr. provided. I agree. I completely agree. I completely agree. And people just, we probably should do a video at some point on the value of movement shooting, because obviously I'm petitioning for Cam Johnson to be traded here. I'm speaking about, Jordan Hawkins and Gradey Dick and the value of Jakobi Walter. So I think that what Darko is running, the system he's running, movement shooters are the kryptonite to the defense, to the opposing defense, especially with big playmakers. Big playmakers, movement shooters is how Light the Beam started in Sacramento.
So does Cam make the Raptors a contender though? That's my question.
No, but he gives you, he opens your window, right? Like he probably express lanes your window at the cost of like a first round pick. And it's a calculated gamble, and of course he has health issues and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, like I'm the person who was saying tank. Like 2 years ago, I was like tank at all costs, and then we traded for Jakob Poeltl. If you trade the same thing you traded for Jakob Poeltl, but instead you do it for Cam Johnson, like that's a much better deal for me, because you're way closer right now than you were back then to the core that you're going forward with, right? Like Scottie's 23. He's not 19. He's 23. It's expected that guys who are 23 to 24 start taking that leap forward. RJ's 24. Immanuel Quickley's 25. Like, we act like these kids are like 19, 20 years old. They're not. They're ready to go to the playoffs right now. And if they're good enough to get there, you should support them, because you supported Fred and Pascal, and I don't know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I don't know, man. I'm full of phrases that I have not used in a while. Anyway, any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. So you just mentioned it would be a package similar to what the Raptors got offered for Yak. So
something like that. So it'd be a first round pick and 2 seconds and an expiring, but that expiring would be like a higher. So one thing that I think is worth noting is also, when you're tanking, like the Nets will be tanking, it helps to make other teams better, especially the teams that will be tanking with you, right? In a weird way, if the Nets could give one rotation piece to Washington, one rotation piece to Detroit, one rotation piece to Toronto, they would be vastly improving their odds of getting Cooper Flag. And if they can be compensated for draft picks in the process, that's actually even more helpful. I don't know how deeply the Nets have thought about rigging the draft, but if I were running the Nets, I don't think Cam Johnson is on my timeline at all, because I don't have a franchise player. And when I draft one, he's going to be 19. So there's like a 4-year gap in age between Scottie and Cooper Flag. There might be a 5-year gap in age. That 5-year gap that's your gap in timeline. And so, while I think Cameron Johnson is the type of player, and his contract and, his play style, he's going to be very serviceable for the next 4 years. 4 years is that's your window. That's your window. 4 or 5 years, right? 5 years, maybe 6 years. And then you'll have to tool it out. You'll have to do the Terrence Ross for Serge Ibaka stuff. You'll have to, but now you have like real young players that are developing on the back end of your roster. You have potentially an Ochai, Jakobi, Gradey. Like, these are all young players. All the players I just named are under 25. Grady's 20.
Mm-hmm.
Jakobi's 19. Ulrich is 18. You have like 3 players, and I really believe in all of them, actually. That's the funny part. I believe in all 3 of them a lot. So, do you necessarily need that Indiana pick? People are like so traumatized because they've almost been tortured by draft picks going out the door, and they're just like, no, not a draft pick. And it's like, bro, like, a draft pick is just what it is, like, Cameron Johnson is better than probably anyone you're going to get in 2026 with the 20-something overall pick. And if you really, really feel that strongly about keeping that Indiana pick, you can probably trade Cam Johnson for a first-round pick at that point, because he's going to retain his value, especially if you start winning. He's probably going to increase his value. right? And if he can stay healthy, you might be able to flip him for like 3 first-round picks in a year. So I'm just saying, like, I don't like to tear things off and say, no, I would never trade a first-round pick. If we're really good, like if Scottie and RJ and IQ are as good as I think they'll be, why not? Why not do it?
So then if you trade for Cam, you get Cam. Does that mean Yak is good to stay? Because they're both the same age, right? I mean,
Yak is a year older.
a year older.
So
So
Cameron Johnson turns 29 in March. And Jakob just turned 29 this year. So yeah, I mean, he's 6 months, 5 months older. 5, 6 months older. It's kind of like the same. And I mean, like, they're both really smart players. I mean, look, if you add Cameron Johnson to this, you pretty much have like the best passing team in the league. Like, I'm definitive on that. Like, this team is just so full of great passers, and there's not one dummy in your top 9 at all. Like, even RJ, who I think, at times in the past I've accused of being a little too ball stoppy, his playmaking has come so far. And Gradey's a good passer. Like, he's a really good passer. Like, some of the reads he makes are really impressive.
yeah,
Davion's a good passer. He's not a great shooter, fine, but he's a good passer. He's a really good passer. So you have, like, really just playmaking has been elevated to this incredible level. And I think it's just there's a very, very strong link between efficient, low turnover offense and good defense.
Do you think they could get it done with sending over Bruce Brown's expiring contract and maybe a second?
No, I don't think so. I think any team with half a brain cell will beat that offer. The problem is that, as I mentioned in yesterday's live about this, and I did a 29-minute live this morning at 6 a.m. because I was keeping me up at night. Why is Masai Ujiri with Sean Marks again? Because again, they were seen together. Hang on, I'll show the picture here. They were seen together during
the KD talks, right? When KD requested a trade?
They were seen together during that time. They were seen together again, I think, during Summer League. And now they've been seen together again here. And they've had this really long-standing relationship. So I'm just very curious. And I made a live this morning for 29 minutes. And in it, I talk about this. Why would Cam Johnson make so much sense, and Day'Ron Sharpe or anybody else on that team? And one of the things was Bruce Brown, has this relationship over there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you think, oh, well, this team can beat that offer, and this team can beat that offer. And it's like, you start looking at those teams, and it's like, those teams have nothing to give. So even if they could give the picks, they can't match the salary because they don't have any core pieces that fit into that $22-23 million salary. And then on top of that, they might be capped out because the new CBA restricts them from making trades. So there's limitations, and maybe they could make the deal, but they don't want to make the deal because they're already loaded up at the power forward and they're thin at the point guard. Like, whereas I think in a normal cycle under the old CBA, there might have been 6, 7, competing offers for Cam. Now there might be like 3. And I think the Spurs would be one of them, and maybe the Mavericks. I don't know what the Mavericks, I remember exactly what the Mavericks CBA situation is, but yeah, I mean, I just don't think there'll be that many offers where you'll have that. And then you have the inside edge because you already have a really favorable relationship with his agent, already have a favorable relationship with him because he's played for your head coach, Darko Rajakovic, and you have this favorable relationship with their head office. So I just, the front office. So I just think that it's a very good fit. And I can't think of a power forward that fits better. And I'm really glad that he balled out tonight because I've been talking about him a lot. Yeah.
Do you think maybe the Nets are looking to hold on to Nick Claxton? Or
yeah, I think he's a little bit younger, right? Nick is 25 and they just signed him. So I think they probably see Nick Claxton as more of a part of the future, whereas Cam is more of like, he makes you too good. That's the problem. Cam Johnson makes you too good. Cam Thomas helps you lose because he's low efficiency, doesn't play defense, right? Ben Simmons helps you lose. Cam Johnson is a part of the old timeline, which was Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson don't belong on that team
at all.
And Cam is sort of like the odd man out at this point. They're not going to sit him because that just tanks his value further. So I just think that he's a very important player. And if we do decide to pivot, I can't think of a player that fits better. Anyways, any final thoughts, man?
So does that make us like the 4th best team in the East then with Cam? Like over Orlando, are we better than Indiana?
I would push us in I think we would be competitive with Indiana, competitive with Cleveland, right? Especially if Evan Mobley takes a jump like I think he's going to make. I think it would put us marginally over Orlando.
So fifth,
So
sixth.
yeah, in that range. I think it would put you over Miami. Because again, if Scottie's as good as I think he is, and Immanuel Quickley is as good as I think he is, Cam Johnson just takes that to a new level because the spacing just gets so much better. And yeah, it just you become so much better defensively too. You know what I mean? Like you go from a team that is like, how is this team supposed to defend with RJ Barrett and Gradey Dick to holy shit, RJ Barrett's your worst defender and you're actually a really good defense. You know, the swap from Cam to Gradey, which is funny because we started this conversation out on is Gradey Dick a good defender? It's like, yeah, but Cam is already like a 90th percentile defender. That's the gap. And he's already like an 85th to 90th percentile defender, which is like to say that he's better than any outlook of Gradey ever defensively. And
so do you think Cam you don't think Gradey has the potential to eventually be better
as good as Cam Johnson?
Yeah.
No, I don't. Defensively, hell no. Offensively, we'll see. But defensively, no. And I mean, it's worth noting Cam, came into the league when he was 23 years old. And he topped out as the third to fourth best player on a finals team. So that's a pretty good player. And he did that when he was 24 years old. And I would argue he's a better player today than he was back then. Yeah. Anyways, man, thanks a lot for calling in. Appreciate it as always.
No worries, Rob. You have a good night.
You too. Final caller is TK. TK, what's up?
Hey, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, it's always better when the Raptors are winning, so I can't complain.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
no, it just.
What are your thoughts of tonight's game?
Yeah, overall, it's good to see I say the cohesiveness of the team. I think Darko and them have done a really good job utilizing this training camp to really bring in the new guys and as well as work a little bit with the old guys. And I know you've been talking to a lot of guys tonight and just talking a lot tonight in general. And some points that I agree with is like Ochai, and of course the way that he's been kind of reintegrated into the offense is really nice to see, especially since he was struggling so much last season. Long term, I still don't know where I see him on this team, just because I guess this is his contract year, so there's a good chance we don't bring him back. But of course, depending on how he does, something else could happen with that. But seeing how he's being integrated in, it's awesome to see with that. And then, of course, the new guys, you've been raving about him so much. And honestly, I've been the exact same. I share a lot of similar opinions to you in terms of the team in general. But Jamal Shead, he's a guy I actually watched. I watched him throughout college, so I knew about him. And a lot of Raptors fans didn't know about him at the draft. When I heard that we were drafting him, I was ecstatic because I already knew what we were going to get with that. And
I was one of those people. I was one of those fans. I hadn't watched
Yeah.
a lot of him. I knew very little about him. I think I'd watched 2 games of him, and it was in the context. I'd watched him when I was watching another Houston player.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah, I'm amazed with him. I think I love this guy, this kid, and every single time I watch him play, he does one more thing that I'm like, I didn't know he could do that. And yeah, it's really reminding me of Kyle Lowry. I don't know if I'm just seeing it because I want to see it, because it makes me feel better to tie something from the old time to the new time. But there's so many things he does that reminds me of Villanova Kyle Lowry. I don't know.
No, I agree 100%. I was telling people even like when we drafted him, they were like, "Oh, like who is this guy?" And I was saying a lot of people tried to attribute when we had Fred to a mini Kyle, and it was mostly probably because of like Fred's tenacity and of course his size.
I don't
But I
think
was like,
Fred ever saw the floor as well as
Oh no, never.
Jamal
never.
Shead does. And I don't think Jamal Shead is ever going to shoot as well as Fred does.
No.
So, I mean, if he ever does, amazing. You have a starting point guard on your hands. But that feel for the game, I don't understand how people keep comparing him to Fred. And it's nothing against Fred, actually.
Exactly,
I'm
exactly.
well over that whole bullshit. He's in Houston, we're fine.
Right.
I just don't see the parallel to Fred. Are they comparing him to Fred because it feels insulting to compare him to Kyle?
Maybe.
Like, I don't get
Yeah.
it because Fred could shoot. Fred could always shoot. Fred shot super well at Wichita State. Like Fred was a good shooter. Fred came out as a good shooter, but Fred was more of a 2 guard, in my opinion, in a point guard's body.
I agree.
Whereas Jamal Shead is the point guard. Like if I was a big, I would want to play with this guy. If I could do, okay, this is going to sound really crazy and probably insulting to Immanuel Quickley and Davion Mitchell, but I'm just going to say it. If I was a big and I could pick any point guard to play with in a pickup game, I would pick Jamal Shead. I might pick Immanuel Quickley if my team was really, really starved for scoring. But if I was just a selfish big, like I just want to be set up and I just want to be in the right spots and I want a point guard who organizes my offense, I would pick him first. And that's just because he is the purest point guard on this team. And that's just like his instincts are all like point. Like he's like a natural point guard. Like I don't know how to explain it. There's some guys who are like they can play point, Shea, Jamal Murray, but they don't have the natural instinct to do it. Like they can do it. They have skills that are point guard adjacent, but they don't have like the natural vision to play that position. They don't have the natural organization. Like their brain does not organize offense the same way. When I look at Kyle Lowry or Chris Paul, that's to me like that's a point guard. And yeah, Jamal Shead's like even more so than Scottie. Like that's
100%.
Yeah. Like he's so good at it. Yeah.
No, I'm excited for him. Really, it was to have a player like that. That's the type of player that like you want to draft. Just not a player that you're going to trade for. It's not a player that you can make. It's a player that kind of has to have all of that with like his skill set, his ability to see the floor, and like the culture shift that we're obviously experiencing in the team as well. Like he brings it to that. So like just his defensive intensity. That's so big for us to have that back, especially at the point guard position, because we've been missing that for years, right? So to have that back is going to be essential with him, and the fact that like he's just really forced his way into Darko's rotation, like preseason 45th pick in the draft, like a pretty late pick, right? Like that's late, and he is, and hopefully, obviously, the mainstream media doesn't cover Toronto, and hopefully later we get to hear them be like, oh wait, who's this draft pick that Toronto got here? But like he's
I mean, did we forget that Gilbert Arenas was a second-round pick? Draymond Green was a second-round pick,
right?
And they popped right away.
Exactly.
Like it was obvious right away. Malcolm Brogdon, the first game I saw of Malcolm Brogdon, the first game I saw of Andrew Nembhard, I think it was the second game I saw of Andrew Nembhard. Do you remember Andrew Nembhard against the game where Tyrese Halliburton missed when he was a rookie and played against Golden State?
Yep. Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. Like when it's clear, it's clear.
It's clear.
Like NBA talent is clear. Like I watched one game of Tamani Kamara last year. I'm like, I'm sold. I don't need any more games. I know what I'm seeing here. You know, more games will help. More games will solidify. But when it's clear, and I had a pretty extreme take, which is freaking turning into a prophecy right now on before the draft, where I said Bronny James isn't a top 1,000 player in the world, and I don't think that it's particularly close. And a lot of people were like, that sounds crazy. And I'm just like, y'all don't understand. Like there's like a real gap in talent here. Like there's a lot of guys in the EuroLeague who are way better than him. And they would come over and they would dominate a summer league in ways that he could not have. He's 3 years away from being half as good as some of those guys.
Yeah.
You know,
that's true.
But when I see a Jamal Shead, I see a real pathway to him becoming like a top 300 player in the world very soon.
100%. Yeah. I don't want to compare him to this player specifically in terms of skill set, but like kind of like at least on defense, and I think he's actually gonna be a better floor general than him. But like a Marcus Smart is like, I'd say like a similar to like his intensity and what he's gonna bring kind of at that position.
See, but that's so interesting because I watched so much of Marcus Smart and he never struck me as a natural point guard.
Yeah, I wasn't. That's what I'm saying. Not really from a defensive standpoint. I'm not saying from an offensive standpoint. As a floor general, they're completely different.
If he could be as good as Marcus Smart defensively, that would be insane. Like I think
I could see that personally. I mean, look at what he's doing now. I know it's a small sample size, but the intangibles are always a big tell because if he gets quicker, if he gets stronger, especially at that size, the way those smaller guards can really dig in and like he's stocky, he's strong, like. It's possible that he could get up there in defense, in my opinion. And I think defense, it really does come down to intangibles a lot. So I could see that being a ceiling. I might be reaching here. Maybe I have too much hype over him, but But I think
Right.
there's a potential with that. Just of like he was a defensive player of the year and national player of the year at Houston. Like he has accolades, and it just wasn't talked about enough. Like he's not
Why
a
do you,
scrub, like you
but see,
said.
but here's the thing. If he's 6'3", 6'4", like Marcus Smart, he's a top 5 pick.
Yeah, no, don't know.
But he's 6 feet tall, and he's a little bit older, right? And he's playing for Houston. He's not playing for Kentucky, but Houston's a pretty big school,
Yeah,
right? It's a great basketball program, and I really like the last few drafts. Like I'm noticing, like I really like the players coming out of Houston. So there's something good there. Yeah, I'm not sure if I see Marcus Smart. I think I
that's
see a
fair.
lot
It's
of
a high
Kyle Lowry.
ceiling.
I think I see a lot of Kyle Lowry. He's not
I do see a
nearly
lot of
as
Kyle in him. Yeah,
he's not nearly as, you know, big in the caboose, right? But the stout, strong, you know, intangible stuff. I think what would stop him from being a Marcus Smart is he's just not 6'4",
yeah, the
and he
physics.
doesn't
Yeah, the
have that
physicals.
size, right?
Yeah,
Like even if he had some sort of extreme metric, like he was 6'1" with a 6'10" wingspan, I could maybe see some Marcus Smart stuff. At this point, though, if he can become what I think he's going to become, I think I'll put his upside as like a 90th percentile defender, like a
yeah,
92nd percentile
definitely.
defender. Whereas Marcus Smart, it might have been closer to like a 96th percentile, 97th percentile defender. So maybe
Right.
it's splitting hairs there, but he has a chance to be as good defensively as guys like Kyle and Fred were, just for
No, I
different
agree.
reasons.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely been a high point this preseason. I think the other thing that I'd mention here is a topic you touched on earlier. No one on the other college brought it on, but kind of like that last roster spot that there could be more movement there. But I 100% agree with Battle taking that last spot. I think if we are to let him go, we're stupid because another team will pick him up right away. You can tell that he's built for the NBA. So I think if we don't find a way to either give him that spot over Bruno, and I hope they do. I could see them being like, but like you should get a third string center there. Bruno's been okay, but he hasn't been great. Personally, again, I give that spot to Battle. If they don't do that, though, I would probably even consider like taking away Carton's two-way spot and then giving that to Battle. Like that's not how high. I won't say high on him, but I think from what I've seen this offseason, that's personally how I would probably go about.
I'm not sure that he would get picked up right away. Actually, he doesn't have the kind of profile of a guy who would get picked up right away. But I do think like some intelligent organization would bring him into their G League program really quickly.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Sorry, by getting picked up, I think like he'd go to like another G League
But
team.
he has the Exhibit 10 deal, right?
Yeah.
So he would be with the Raptors 905.
Oh, that's true. Right, it was Exhibit 10.
AS Modi 2011 saying Shed reminds me of ex-Raptor Mike James. Fun fact: Mike James is literally my most hated Raptor of all time. Jamal Shead has a chance to very well become one of my top 5 Raptors of all time in terms of just watchability and how much I'm rooting for him. Look, I was an undersized guard. Okay, Fred VanVleet fucking ruined rooting for undersized guards for me. Okay, because Mike James did the same thing. Like I get why you think Mike James, because he's a pit bull and he's a dog and all that stuff. Mike James was a pretty good defender as well. I get it. But man, as a person and as a leader, he seems very different than Mike James. But I get it. I do see it. I see it too. That's the worst part.
Bit,
I can just imagine like Mike James picking up full court, Mike James being a dog, Mike James getting into people's faces. But Mike James could shoot. Like Mike James, I think he shot like 44% from 3 that year. So if he could ever shoot as good as Mike James, holy shit.
That'll be
if he could shoot as well as Lindsey Hunter, that would be just that's never gonna happen. But I mean, that would be insane.
Yeah, we can see it maybe, but I mean, not
Lindsey Hunter.
Not that good. Not that good. I'd say more. It could get to like Mike James. I mean, but we'll see with that. We'll see. He has decent mechanics. It's going to be a thing on if that's something that they really want him to work on, because he might not work on that as much right now, just because the other parts of his game are so strong. I don't see him really be in a position where he's going to need to shoot, like have to shoot. Unless they want to put him in those positions. So it's probably going to be a part of his game that gets developed a little bit later, because just the other parts are so strong, and they're really going to definitely harp on that, because just the passes that he's able to do, the cross court skip pass, oh my goodness, that was just beautiful to see from a rookie. Like again, that's just awesome that he's going to be able to go right into that rotation. Like people were saying
Mhm.
G League at the beginning of the year, like he might go down at some point, but like there's no way he's going down
But
right away.
why? What benefit is there to sending Jamal Shead to the G League right now?
I don't
I
think
see
he
none.
will.
He is an
But
NBA player. He is not a
yeah,
G League player. He doesn't need time in the G League. He doesn't need to be physically down there. There's nothing. It's humiliating. He's a really good player. Like right now, like okay, so Reed Shepherd was a good example. I saw Reed Shepherd play one game at Kentucky, and I was like ready to put him at number 1 on my draft board. Like I moved him up from like 9 to like 2 or 1, like on one game.
uh,
And it wasn't because he shot the the piss out of the basketball or whatever. It's not because he hit a few shots or they won the game. It's just watching him. It's watching him,
right,
understanding the angles at which he gets his shot. It's understanding how that translates to the NBA. And I was like, Reed's going to be a lot better than people think he's going to be, and he's underrated for the same probable reasons that a lot of guys with his profile are underrated, because he looks like Jimmer Fredette, and people can't forget that. People can't forget that Jimmer Fredette failed, and therefore this will fail. But it's like, this is not Jimmer Fredette, bro. I remember Jimmer Fredette. He don't look like he didn't play like this. And Reed's just such a great playmaker. And it's like the same feeling I'm having with Jamal Shead is like, is he probably like a top 10 to 12 player in this draft? I'm not saying top 10, 12 pick. I'm saying player.
player, yeah.
Yeah, man, he is. He doesn't belong in the G League. The G League is for those bottom 30 guys. Those are the guys who need to be down in the G League. It's for raw guys. It's for guys on contending teams where they don't get minutes. Jamal Shead should get minutes on day one. He should be a part of the key rotation. And, I really have warmed up to Davion a lot. I really like, some of the stuff that he's saying, and I love the influence he's had. I don't see a world in which these are comparable prospects. I just don't.
Yeah. No, I
don't
get
see
that.
it.
I get that. Yeah, I wasn't. No, I agree with you too. Like, I wasn't saying that he should go down. I could see like some weird politic reason at some point that they send him down. I don't know, but the Raptors have done silly things like that in the past. But I don't think, at least to start off, that definitely won't happen. So, no, I'm super
Mhm.
high on him. Super, super high on him. Yeah, I won't take too much more of your time. I think the only other thing I'd mention is I know you're a big Scottie guy. I mean, most people are in our fan base for sure.
Well, one would
This
hope
game
so.
in particular, I really felt like, I don't know, the game really looked so easy to him. And I know it was Brooklyn, but I'm not talking about just the way that they were defending him, but the way he looked. He looked like, I don't want to say a superstar, but I don't know. I could just really. A lot of people think there's been a lot of more hype and a lot more like analysts and people being like watch Scottie Barnes, like he's looking different, and watching tonight just to pull up into the jump shots, the decision making, the defense. There were a couple lapses, but compared to the past 2 years, sorry, not the past, yeah, compared to the past 2 years, I would say, um, just the difference is just night and day. Like it's really, really evident that like the maturity is there and you can see it in his game. Like it doesn't look rushed. It doesn't look like I'm not sure if I should shoot this shot or if I shouldn't. It looks like the shots that he's going to hit and he could like, yeah, get to that like 23, 24, 25 points a game. And then like, if he were to become elite, it'd be a situation where he's like, I'm going to take over here and do what I want to do. And then he could like, that's how it would be like push him into that like next level of a star in the league. But like in terms of his like raw abilities and how much he's improved, I think it's just phenomenal. And I think that like we're really gonna see something special with him on on an average performance from him when he like doesn't have like a bad shooting night, just like a good average performance from him is gonna be like really good and smooth, and like a great performance is gonna be like amazing to see. So that's my thoughts on him. I'm excited for him this season for sure. And then the
Yeah,
only other
I
thing,
think he's taken a massive step up.
yeah,
Like I really do. I think his ball handling is just a lot tighter. I think a lot of people made a lot of the first game against Washington. They're like, "Oh, he can't dribble." No, he can, and he's manipulating that dribble way better. There's
exactly, yeah,
so many plays. There was that one play against Boston where he puts the defender on his hip, and then he just kind of draws the second defender, and then just there's a third defender cheating, and he just flicks it up at the rim. And there's always the threat to pass with him too, right? So I think that he's getting better at sort of snake dribbling into the middle of the floor and just dissecting the defense. And then the other
yeah,
thing that I'm noticing with him is he's not predator. Like I don't know how to explain it. Maybe I don't have the right words for it. He's not an offense. he's not a scavenger anymore on offense. That's the right
Right.
word. He's a predator. So he's gone from scavenger to predator, which is really interesting. So, and this is not a concept that I've ever really brought up, or not a concept that I've ever heard anyone really talk about, but it's something how I often think about offensive players as scavengers and predators. And when you watch a predator, there's a certain confidence with how they stalk their prey, right? There's like like I'm faster than gazelle. I'm gonna
Yeah.
eat this gazelle. I just need to pick which gazelle and exert as little amount of energy as possible to get the one that I want. But when they're scavengers, they're always like looking for bones to pick, right?
Right.
And there's offensive players that are like very much scavengers. And I think for a lot of Scottie's, time with the Raptors as an offensive player, he's been a scavenger. He's been trying to find mismatches, find weaknesses, force switches on smaller, players. But then there were gaps and times where you would see him be a predator, where he would go to Kevin Durant or LeBron James and you would be like, oh shit, like this is what it could look like. But it never lasted. It was just a quarter. It was just one game. And then he would have another game where he was purely a scavenger. I've seen him be more of a predator this preseason than I have in a long time. Like there was elements of it last year that were also flashes of it last year, but it was still scavengery. It was higher volume, but it was still scavenger. It was like finding an open shot. But now he's got a game plan when he goes into a game. With that Boston game, he's like, I'm going to shoot a ton of threes until they start lifting up and stop dropping against me. And then I'm going to pick them apart with my passing right over the defense because I'm comfortable that I can make this pass. And I'm comfortable that Gradey and Ochai are going to get open looks at the rim. And that's exactly what he did. He came in with this incredible game plan and he absolutely shredded them. And yes, I do think that there's such a gap between him and Paolo right now. Like I'm watching Paolo Banchero play and I'm having the American media shove it down my throat that Paolo is a top 25 player and Scottie's not. And I'm just watching these two play and I'm like, Paolo's still in the scavenger mode. He's still reacting slowly to things. He still doesn't have like the complete idea of where everyone is on the court. There's still things that are catching him off by surprise. Nothing's catching Scottie by surprise. Like he knows the entire court and the entire play like 4 seconds before everybody else does. He's just waiting for his teammates to cut into place. And I think when you add players like some of his most synergistic teammates have not even played this preseason yet.
Yeah.
With him, especially Kelly, Bruce, RJ. Like those are the teammates that he works super well with. Immanuel Quickley, we saw it today. Like he works so well with Immanuel Quickley. So I'm very confident that he's going to take this massive step up, and I'm predicting all NBA for him this year.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. All right, TK. Thanks a lot for calling me, man. Really appreciate the call.
Of course. No worries.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Have a good night.
Good night. All right. Okay, we ran the poll on who was the most impressive, and we got Jamal Shead with 37%, Gradey Dick with 56%, Ochai Agbaji with 5%, Davion Mitchell with 2%. Okay, so I will say, for me personally, in terms of expectations, it has to be between Jamal and Ochai in terms of just how impressive it was. And Ochai specifically over the last 2 games, Jamal throughout. Gradey was incredibly impressive, but I actually had an expectation of him being really good coming into this year. And he's a high lottery pick. And he's someone that, again, I hadn't written off. If we go back to my preseason sort of tier rankings, I feel very differently about where I have certain guys. So I had, if you recall, I think I had Ochai and Davion at the very bottom. Like I had them as like, they're just dead weight on the roster. I don't feel that way about Ochai right now. And I know that it's just preseason, but it wasn't makes or misses. I'm not looking at that. I don't even care about that. I don't care if he misses every single shot. It's how he defends and how he's cutting into space. Like he's making open dunks and open layups. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not those shots are not going away against Charlotte and Detroit in the regular season. They're going to be there as well. And again, he's been massively over leveraged as a starter in place of RJ Barrett. But he's going to be playing a lot of those minutes against bench units, and I like his versatility. And again, given what you paid to get him, which is a late first round pick, I don't think it's a big deal, and I think he's been really impressive. And yeah, Eric's point of view saying Rap's going to win on Wednesday. Wow, that would be great to start the season out and win against Cleveland. You look at that Cleveland team that people have pegged, some people have pegged for 50 wins, and you ask yourself, go band for band down the roster and ask yourself, why? Is it partially because they had a little bit more success last year? Probably. Is it because Donovan Mitchell is seen as a more prototypical and probably a safer bet to be a floor-raising first option than a Scottie Barnes? Probably. Is it because there is some expectation that Evan Mobley plus Jared Allen is like one of the best defensive front courts in the league in the 4-5, and that's just a lot in terms of expectations on wins and losses? Sure. I think the Raptors can beat that team. I think the Raptors can beat a lot of teams in that Cavaliers tier. I think they can beat the Sacramento Kings because I don't think the Kings can defend, right? Like I wouldn't pick them to beat the Kings, but I can see a world in which they beat the Kings and it's not really crazy that they're doing it, right? So again, I don't think the Raptors should be a lock for anybody to make the playoffs, whatever. But if you go back in this channel's history over the last 6 months, I want to say, every week to 2 weeks, there's the same live, and it's like with the same messaging. This team's not that bad. This team's not that bad. And I'm not victory lapping right now because we beat the Celtics and the Nets in preseason. We went 5-0 last year in the preseason, and we lost a lot of games. I think what I'm looking at is what was wrong with this team coming into preseason, and how do I feel about those things now? I had no doubts about the talent of a Scottie Barnes coming into preseason. I had no doubts about the coaching technique and offensive philosophy of a Darko Rajakovic. I had real concerns about Gradey's ability to hold up defensively in the starting lineup. I really did. I was like, oh my God, like he has to take such a step up. He did. He did. I had a lot of concerns about that Yak IQ pick and roll. They've allegedly been working on it all off season. Looked okay today. It'll probably get better. I had concerns about Jakob Poeltl's overall commitment to this team. I know that sounds somewhat slanderous, but I'm just saying, as a guy who's almost like a holdover from the previous era and iteration, who's talked openly about how he doesn't want to be on a losing team or a team that's not actively trying to win games, I was very curious about which Jakob we would see because he's such an important player. And I've been very resoundingly convinced that the version of Jakob we're about to see is a very good one. So clearly, even though he initially came here as a Nick Nurse guy and a guy who had this familiarity with Nick Nurse because obviously, as we know, Nurse was a huge component or a huge influence over that second unit on which, Fred and Pascal and Jakob played. I think he's really bought into Darko's offensive philosophy, and kudos to him for that. I had concerns about the depth, just like the caller who called in, who had concerns about the depth and saying, the Raptors' depth doesn't hold up. And now I'm looking at the depth around the league, and there are teams that I'm like, yeah, they're a pretty decent team. Like, consider the Dallas Mavericks. They have Najee Marshall off the bench. Do I think Najee Marshall is better than Ochai Agbaji? Of course. I think he's a different class of player. Is he better than Bruce Brown? Sure. I would take him over Bruce Brown. So yeah, you could say, like, you know what I mean? Like there's a gap. There's still a gap. No one's saying the Raptors have a top 10 bench. I'm not crazy. But I also don't think they have a bottom 10 bench, which is what I thought they would be coming into this season. I thought they'd be a bottom 10 bench. I thought the starters would win minutes and then the backups would come in and there'd be nothing because I was much lower on Ochai, much lower on Davion, much lower on Jamal Shead. And now I'm just insanely high on those guys. So I see a world in which this team really does push to be very competitive and very fun to watch. And I can't wait. And this season is going to be so fun. And I'm really excited. And I don't care if they win or lost tonight or they won or lost against the Boston Celtics. I care that this is a team that plays together regardless. It's been really fun to watch. Like, I got to tell you, like, I have never had so much fun watching a Raptors preseason. Is that fair to say? I don't think I've had this much fun watching a Raptors preseason. And I hope you guys are enjoying it too, because again, as a fan base, we have really, really been through the grind. As a fan base, we've seen a lot of crap. We've seen a lot of crappy basketball, selfish basketball, young players kind of come and go. And I feel like when you go through that for like 3-4 years, you can sort of just like lose faith. There is a bit of a, I don't want to get my hopes up again, because I got my hopes up about the Delano Bantons and the David Johnsons of the world, and it didn't work out. And I got my hopes up about the 2021, 2022 Raptors, and it didn't work. Or I think it's okay to be hopeful about this team. Jakobi is a bucket too. Yes, sir. Yak seems to have his hops again. You know what? He does seem a lot faster, doesn't he? Eric's point of view, especially if we're on the ball with threes. Okay, let's get to some super chats here. So Jonathan Savoy, fun game tonight. Yak looks great, and it warms my heart to see it. Do you feel any better about the Yak trade, seeing how well it works with Scottie and Darko's system? No, I don't feel better about the Yak trade. I feel better about Jakob. So I said it when it happened, that no matter what happens, I'll never support the trade when it happened, because of when it happened and what has resulted from it. That doesn't mean that you can't be very excited about the player, right? Like I made a video, I think like 2-3 weeks after Jakob Poeltl was traded to Toronto, saying how much I really loved Jakob Poeltl, the player. I have no doubt that he's a really good player. I think he's been better than I expected him to be this season, but I have no doubt that he can be a contributing piece on a winning team, and even a starting center on a pretty decent team, like a 50-win team. I think he can anchor a 50-win defense. I think he could be on a championship team. Shit, and all of that is true. Unfortunately, it's also true that you slightly overpaid for him, and he was a free agent. And it feels like that entire premium that you paid for to get him, the first round pick, the 2 second round picks, was largely due to prop up a core that I did not support. So I will never support the trade. But if we had just gone out and signed Jakob Poeltl for $80 million in free agency, yeah, I would have supported it. I think I would have supported it. I would have understood that a lot more. Noble Venom with the super chat here. I think a lot of people underestimate the Scottie leap. At this rate, I would not be that surprised if he is a 25-point per game scorer this year. Yeah, I wouldn't be that surprised either. I wouldn't bet on it, but yes, I think 23 to 25 is a very reasonable jump. I do see a lot of players on this team that like to shoot, and as evidenced by the fact that Gradey has led the team in field goal attempts for 2 straight games, and I think that will happen quite a bit, because he's a bucket, like he's a shooter, and he should shoot. And I think that egalitarian offense is exactly how Scottie would have it. I think everything about Scottie screams team, and that may not be something that ESPN likes, that may not be something the league likes, but I hope as a observer and lover of basketball is something you like, that this is a player that would happily step aside and let Immanuel Quickley chase a 40 ball, or be really happy that RJ is averaging 25 points per game for an entire month. Like, there are black holes offensively where nothing else is able to function without them. We're having an entire debate about LeBron James, and I'm not considering LeBron James a black hole, but LeBron is a player that everyone else has to adjust to. And I think one of the beauties about Scottie is he'll adjust. So when you're having a big game, it's not like Scottie's got to run the pick and roll, right? He'll be the roll man for you. It's when it's not working for you, and when you're down, that he's going to be like, no, give me the ball and let me go to work. And I liked a lot of players like this. Arvydas Sabonis was like this. Rasheed Wallace was like this. Not the highest volume shooters and guys, but their baseline gets bigger and bigger, right? So will Scottie ever be like a 32 point per game scorer? Maybe not. Maybe he doesn't get to 32 points per game or 30 points per game like Luka, because that's not really his game. But could he comfortably put up 25 points? Could he get talented enough where 25 points per game is just, he can do that in his sleep? I think he's really close right now. The homie nicked with a super chat saying something about Yak last year just didn't feel right. He seemed to not be himself. He clearly seemed hurt. As much as they are friends, he always felt like an awkward fit next to Pascal. That's interesting. An awkward fit next to Pascal. Yeah. When Pascal was what he was in 2018, they were like a seamless fit. And it's weird because Pascal is a radically different player today than he was in 2017, 2018, when they really had the crucial part of their success happened during that time, and they had just this great chemistry. And people change, like people don't like really, remember that, but people really do change. People go different ways, and Pascal went through a lot, especially in our early 20s. I mean, think about yourself. Like, how different were you from 22 to 28? Like, people change a lot. And he went to San Antonio and he grew. His IQ grew, right? His philosophy on the game and his philosophy towards team grew, right? He was there being mentored by guys like Tim Duncan and Greg Popovich. So yes, to come here and everything is all bet on yourself and contract negotiations, I'm sure he was pretty sick to death of it too. But ironically, it is through the absence of his familiar friends that we've actually gotten back to a style of basketball that Yak has always been this guy. There's not a selfish bone in Jakob Poeltl's body. Like, that's one thing I'll say, and I'll appreciate that so much about him. He doesn't care about his numbers, and that fits with what you're doing. That fits. There aren't really a lot of guys on this team that really give a shit about numbers, and I think that that's a good thing. Especially your core leaders don't care. That's a really good thing. Pascal's still following Raptors on his IG. That's good. He should. I feel more comfortable in Gradey's shots than I did with Gary's. You were right. They worked well together as a combo off the bench early in the career, but Pascal's game changed. He became less of a fit. Yak is low maintenance. Yak is super low maintenance. And, Jakob is, I always look forward to his interviews because he's the one guy on the team that never lies. And it's just something I've noticed with him. Like, it feels like he's physically incapable of lying. And that's my favorite thing about Jakob Poeltl, because sometimes it's hard to glean how the team feels or to get a barometer on, how a dynamic is going or how practices are going or what might be wrong with the team or how a team is, handling or coping, with a 3-4 game loss. And, all you have to do is ask Jakob Poeltl, how's the vibes in the locker room? And he's going to say something like, things have been better. And you're going to get like a clear window into it. He just doesn't lie. And I really like people who don't lie. So, and, he seems very selfless, and I think he's going to be really great for the development of guys like LaRouche and guys like Jonathan Mobo. And again, I'm looking up and down this roster for any player that I'm like, oh, I really wish that player wasn't on this team. I don't feel that way about anybody. I'm cool. I mean, Bruno Fernando, that's the only one. That's literally one. And even with him, it's like third string center. That's my beef at this point. Bro, I was beefing with the franchise player like 2 years ago. I'm good. Like, third string center is nice. We're happy with this. Karen and Hall saying, Rob, a suggestion. Play your intro at the beginning of each live. By the time YouTube kicks over from waiting screen to video, you're already 20, 30 seconds into talking. Really? Damn, I did not know that. That is very, very interesting to note. Okay, that's why people run the intro. Okay, a little workaround for anybody who ends up having that problem. You can always scroll back to the beginning of the live and you can play on speed. So you can go to 1.25, or you can even skip over a boring segment or whatever and catch up. That's what I usually do. So I listen to the panel when I'm not on, and sometimes I get distracted or have to answer a phone call, and then I'll just listen at 1.25. What do you think is Scottie stealing? Top 5 player in the NBA. 25, 10, 8, like Pippen meets Magic. It's really funny? Really funny, actually. Scottie was guarding Ben Simmons like he could actually shoot today. And that's really just, I mean, I don't know if it's personal, but do you think Scottie heard all the Ben Simmons comparisons throughout his life and just decided in a preseason game in Brooklyn to put that to bed once and for all by making more threes in preseason than Ben Simmons has made in the last 3 years in one game? Is Darko better than Nurse? Here's the thing. I don't like Nick Nurse. I make no secret of this. I'm not a fan. I think a large part of what went wrong with Toronto was on him for allowing it to happen. He's a really good coach, though. I can't deny the creativity or the know-how. I actually do think Darko is very underrated in that regard as well. I think he's really smart, and people sometimes gloss him over as just this rah rah pom pom guy. When it comes time to coaching in a series, I think he's going to surprise some people. I'm not saying he's, the Phil Jackson of Kumbayas, and I'm not saying that he is like the Tex winner or the best taskmaster or the best tactician. I have no idea if he's Brad Stevens with the X's and O's. I have no idea, right? But I do know that his overall vision for basketball is very coherent. And I'm saying that just as someone, maybe it's very conceited of me to say that because I agree with it, I think it's good. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe he's wrong and I'm wrong for supporting it. But I think that his overall understanding and vision for basketball, again, I say vision because vision has been a bit of a buzzword and I'm using it as much as I can over the last 24 hours that people have sight, but they don't have vision. I think he has a great vision for how the game is evolving. I don't find his ideas stale or dated. I think that he has proven over and over again that he's really adaptable and he's having to sort of adjust so much on the fly because he keeps dealing with so many injuries. And last year there was so much controversy and so many trades. And I said it in a live before. There just aren't a lot of coaches who would be willing to sign up for this and take all these losses on their resume. And it's a big deal because like all of these guys have been working for years and years and decades sometimes towards this opportunity. And why should one coach get to coach the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis Antetokounmpo and the other coach has to deal with Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby on their way out and Jonte Porter? You know what I mean? Like, so I just appreciate how hard he works. I appreciate how much he works well with his star player, and I really appreciate how much his roster seems to really trust him. There was a moment where in this game where Immanuel Quickley was really like, I mean, really driving me nuts a little bit, in the first half where, and I understood it because he's a little rusty and I knew that he would have a little bit of a difficult time adjusting. But there was a talk between him and Darko, and I don't know if you caught it on the television, but he was just like, you need to just let it go. He's trying to like reinforce some of the ideas that they're working through and seeing how Immanuel quickly responded to that and how much better he got after that. And that was around the second quarter. I thought it was so interesting. And again, it's situational, right? Certain coaches, certain units, right? You sometimes have these manage yourself. I'm just here for the X's and O's. You guys police yourself. And then there's the coaches that really do have to establish the culture and they have to establish a development plan and get everyone engaged and teach everyone how to be a pro. And I think Darko will very suitably morph into the second type of coach as well. Yeah. The homie Nick saying the reason why I didn't mind the Jakob trade when it happened is because it seemed like a reasonable addition to help the current roster, but also an addition that could help in the future. So here's the thing. If you were going to give up an expiring contract, a future lottery pick, right, and two somewhat high seconds, and also in the process worsen your lottery pick, which ended up being Grady Dick, but could have very easily been an Asar Thompson or an Amen Thompson or a Derek Lively or a Kaysen Wallace, who, as much as I love Grady Dick, all those guys have been much better throughout their career so far, right? So you have to consider a Bilal Coulibaly, right? Like everyone is going nuts over like Ace Bailey, right? Like how excited would you be to have a Bilal Coulibaly on this team? You know what I mean? Like a defensive stopping wing. So Grady might still end up being one of the top 5 players in that draft class. Definitely could happen. But the point is, he gave up a chance to tank when it was clear that he should tank. He gave up a chance to do a lot of stuff. So I just don't think so. And my point is, if you could convert those assets into a shooting big, like a big who could shoot like a Miles Turner, I think the synergy with Scottie would be better. The difference here is, as much as I like the idea of pairing Scottie with a big who can shoot, I also really love the idea of pairing Scottie with a big who can pass. So I don't know. It's cool. Love Darko. So happy we have Jama back too. Yes. And what's ironic is when the Raptors were looking for a coach, I actually made a video called Jama Time, where I talked about why I would really like Jama to be the head coach. Well, I'm really glad he's back. And I think he's been a really positive influence. And, when it comes time to win, I'm sure the coaching staff itself will undergo some changes, and hopefully you'll see some very serious coaching candidates come in under Darko to help him schematically, right? I have no idea how to feel about Pat Delaney. I know how I feel about Jamal Shead. I love him, but Pat Delaney defensively, we'll see, man. Like, defense looks good so far. Looks really good. So Darko is a development coach. I don't know come playoff time. So here's the thing. Just because his strength has been development so far does not mean that he is not a good coach. It is yet to be determined how good a coach he is. I am very tempted to actually go back and watch some of the G League rosters that he coached for, or maybe even do a bigger deep dive into his basketball philosophy in general. But we don't know. All I can see is that he's not emotionally reactive. He's not too emotionally reactive, which I really appreciate. He keeps his wits about him, so he stays kind of stoic and calm. Like, even after like an 8-0 run in the fourth quarter where his team is pretty much blowing a win, his demeanor doesn't change. I don't see him yelling at his teammates after a rough timeout. Like, I often see his players looking to him for guidance instead of validation. And I think that that's a great thing. Like, you want to be able to look to your coach, not to see if your coach is mad at you, or if your coach is about to bench you, or if your coach is angry or fuming. You'd want to be looking at your coach to see if what you're doing is what he wants and how you can do it better. Do you know what I mean? Like, ideally, like, I don't know, there's something very random. Just, if you play basketball, that when you check into the game or check out of the game, you go through the scores table and then you do a beeline past your coach, right? So I will often look at that interaction between the coach and the player when that player is checking out or checking in, and I'll see how eager that coach, that player is to really listen to that coach. And you can tell a lot by that limited interaction. And usually it's like a couple of words, or, a pat on the back or something. But very often you'll see when a Gradey comes out, like, you'll see Darko, looking at him, and Gradey will just come to him and really just like ask a question or something like that. Like, there's a real good communication here. And I think for a young team, that's important. But a lot of the same things that make a coach like a really good development coach are the same things that make that coach a good coach, period. If Ty Lue is fired, should the Raptors get him? No. Darko may be our Mark Jackson. I understand why you think that, but we will never know if Mark Jackson, what he could have done with the Warriors core. But I actually would say Darko is more Steve Kerr than Mark Jackson, if you want my honest opinion. Ty Lue not going to get fired. Injuries aren't his fault. I'm glad Jordy Fernandez got a chance at head coach. Yeah, you know what Jordy and Darko have in common? They've both been coaching since they were teenagers. It's really interesting. And yet the casual observer will think these guys just fell off a bus somewhere. It's so funny. No, these guys worked exceedingly hard. They're both wonderkins. They're both well ahead of their time. And I think it's unfortunate that Jordy will be coaching the Brooklyn Nets, but I have a feeling that he'll hopefully create a positive culture in that locker room, because I don't think that the culture has been very positive. Yeah. Anyways, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you to the 500, 600, 700 of you who tuned in. And, that's been a wrap on preseason. I will do my preseason grades report this weekend. We'll go through every single player. We'll maybe break down some tape. We'll look at, what these players need to get better. I'll do my wishing hat, which is basically like one thing I wish for every single player going forward. And, it's something that I wanted to do this year. And I can't wait for the regular season. This is going to be a really fun team to watch. I can't wait. And I'll have you covered every single game, with the exception of February 26th and 28th, where we'll be late. But we're going to try to do the videos thing every single time. We're going to try to do like 6-7 plays. Let me know if there's something that you think is missing from these lives that could elevate them. I think I've talked about this, that I want to keep Pinsire Basketball as the #1 Raptors post-game show. And we're facing a lot of competition from a lot of places. So if you have an idea for how to make this show better, if you have an idea how I can be better, if there's something that I'm doing that's maybe, like I think some people have said calls are too long. So today we tried to keep them short. Just let me know when the video goes live, what you think we can do to make it better. Is there something like maybe I was actually thinking the other day that there's an app where I can draw X's and O's and then I can transfer it to the screen. Now I'm not the most technologically savvy person, but if I could ever figure that out, that would be really great. Doing an X's and O's and then having it appear on the screen would be really cool. So yeah, all ideas. And Liban, or is it Liban? I'm not sure, but you're doing good. You're doing great. Thank you. All right. Make sure to like this video on the way out. Thank you to all of you, and Donald, not Donald Fagan, with the Darko quote. This is a crap. Well, yes. All right. Talk to you guys later. Bye.